Okay, I'm going to start at the recording and say to everybody, welcome to the November 29th, 2023 meeting of the Southborough Historical Commission at 7:04 p.m. And I want to call the meeting to order by noting that 6 of our 7 members are currently present. Dan Blanchard is going to be slightly late. Present are myself, Kevin Miller, Vice Chair Annie Pfaff, Jim Blaschke, Grant Farrington, Michelle Hokinson, and our newest member, who I want to welcome, Kelly O'Brien, who is joining us tonight for the first time. And I'm absolutely thrilled because it means we have a full complement of 7 once Dan gets here. And so Kelly, welcome and thank you so much for, applying and being patient through that process, and glad you're on board. I don't know, do you have anything you want to say, or just
no, just thank you for that introduction, and hi.
Yeah, no big speeches required.
No.
We have a crowded agenda, but we're really glad to have you. I think the group is going to do a lot of good things together. So let's just move straight on then. Before we get to our guests, and with my apologies for making wait just a couple minutes, we have a very brief need to take on a budget item. This is for fiscal year 25. And I will turn it over to Annie Pfaff, who also doubles as our treasurer. And Annie, you can lead us through it.
Yep, great. So as you guys likely know, this is the budget season for the town finance office. And they're just asking us to confirm our budget request for FY25. So that's the next fiscal year. And I am proposing that we keep our budget the same as it was this past year. So right now, our entire budget is just $1,000 for the line item called outreach and education, which we allocate toward our historic house sign program, estimated at 10 for about $100 each. In actuality, with our new vendor, it's a little bit less, so we should be able to do maybe 12 or 13 signs with that. So I'm proposing we keep our budget the same in terms of the funds allocated specifically to historical. As I think Kevin may be updating you later in the agenda, we do have some excess ARPA funds that we'll be able to use for some additional signs and other initiatives. But in terms of our historical budget, I say we keep it the same at $1,000 and move forward with that request. So just want to open that up for discussion, if any, before we vote. We do have to vote before I submit it to the finance office to make it official.
And I would just add that Annie is correct that we are going to have a little bit of extra funds that come to us courtesy of the an ARPA surplus that with the historic district signage that we came in to bid, we actually were able to accomplish that under budget. So we're turning a little bit back, and the select board did grant us the ability to keep some of that money for initiatives, which I'll discuss later in the meeting. So it's good news financially. And meanwhile, coming in, I think level funding for 2025 is kind of a good look. And I don't really see that we have a need to ask for more at this point. If we have things that come up, we can sort of do it. CPC requests or other avenues. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, sorry. The only question I have, Annie, I know you're fairly new to taking over being in charge of the sign program from Kate. So do you happen to know like how many signs per year we had, like sign requests we had been receiving and or producing previously, obviously pre-COVID and all that, but is 10 enough to cover what we think?
Yeah. So
okay.
we actually haven't been producing signs at all since I've been on the commission, which is I think 3 years now. Wow, that's been a while. So, you know, we are, as I said, you know, our vendor passed away, and it took a long time. It took a long time to kind of reinvigorate the program. But I think let me pull up the I have the list of all of the signs that we have. And it's been over, I mean, I think 7 or 8 years now. And I think it's only like 40 signs total.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think we've ever done more than 10 in a year, except for possibly right at the beginning when we had the launch, and, you know, a lot of houses, you know, learned about the program and kind of did their request right at the beginning. But I certainly think that 10 is generous. And as Kevin just mentioned, we do have a surplus that we can put towards additional signs this year as we kind of relaunch the program. So if we did have a flurry of activity, we would be able to cover that this year. But I don't see a need to ask for more money to cover standard requests.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the only question I'd have, and maybe it's for everybody, is I don't recall in any past meetings, I was trying to think, is there anything we've contemplated doing that would require extra budget beyond the signs?
So it's funny you ask that, because I'm having deja vu of this same discussion last year, in which we said, oh, well, let's just do status quo for the next year and, you know, think offline about projects that we might want to do. And as far as I know, I don't think there's any big things that we're ready to, you know, have a financial outlay in the next year, besides, you know, what we already kind of have funding for. But I would defer to Kevin, who would probably know more about that than me.
Yeah, Jim, there's one item that'll come up later on our agenda that will cost a little money, but we got money for it. The select board was nice enough to allow us to retain some of the ARPA money to go toward that. So I actually think we're in pretty good shape. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oops, I'm sorry. I was just thinking, I don't know if so we were talking about the town common and how it needed some work. So I didn't know if that was whose budget that would come out of, what specifically the railings, you know,
Yeah,
I've
had discussion with the select board about this, and again, this is actually later in our agenda tonight. But the bottom line is, it's not going to come out of our budget.
Okay.
It's going to come out of somebody else's, and that's the topic of a later discussion. But I actually, not to preempt that part of the discussion later in the agenda, but I did volunteer a portion of the return ARPA funds that I indicated I would like it to go toward that, because we really believe very strongly in it as a project. And it initiated a larger discussion about funding and work to be done in that whole area, Old Burial Ground, Town Common, and including the rural cemetery, all as a package. And so more on that later tonight.
Great, thank you.
Great. Kelly, I know this is all new to you, but any question you have about budget?
No, I don't have any comments. I'm just trying to focus in and listen.
Well, then I think it would, you know, in the interest of moving it along, it would be good to have a motion to present to the finance office. This would be Brian Valentine and company, request for fiscal 25 to level fund our budget at $1,000.
I so move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Who is that?
Annie.
Annie? Okay. Thank you. Moved by Jim, seconded by Annie. We'll do a roll call vote. Annie?
Yes.
Jim?
Aye.
Grant?
Aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Kelly?
Aye.
And Miller's aye. So that's 6-0 in favor. Thank you, Annie, so much.
you.
And someday we'll get this budget up to maybe 5 figures, but hang on. Meanwhile, we're on to our next item, which is a discussion of 84 Main Street, the Burnett House, the preservation restriction with Mr. John Deli Priscoli, who represents the sort of corporate entity that the town is in the agreement with. And so I'm going to promote first Mr. Deli Priscoli, and also I believe Michael Wison is here, who's going to talk on this as well. So I'm promoting both of them. And I'll let Michael sort of explain the connection here. Full disclosure, of course, Michael is the former chair of the Historical Commission and currently president of the Southborough Historical Society. So I think the way to, and welcome to you both, John and Michael, and thank you for coming. I'm very appreciative. And just to set this up, because Jim, were you on the Historical Commission when this agreement was entered into?
No, it was after my time, but
No, so I think that means that everybody here is new to this. And so, we have, John, be patient with us because it's a bit of a learning curve for everybody, I think myself included. And the Historical Commission has not reviewed, this agreement, again, just for people in the public that may look in on this later, is a preservation restriction agreement that was entered into between again, I want to get the corporate entity right. It's the 84 Main Street LLC. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
And the town of Southborough, to put it succinctly. It's quite a long, statement at the opening of the document. And this document was completed and signed on August 23rd, 2016. It came with the exchange from Southborough, to the concern, the 84 Main Street LLC, of $970,000 in Community Preservation Act funds. And the Historical Commission is responsible for, if I get the wording of this right, responsible to administer, manage, and enforce on behalf of the grantee, and that would be the town of Southborough, this agreement. So periodically, it's our responsibility to review it and make sure things are progressing and going well, and everybody understands what their rights and responsibilities are, and just to kind of ensure that we're all on a smooth path here. And so we haven't looked at this since I joined the commission in June of 2021. And, I will say that I think I became chair about 9 months later, and have held off on wanting to address this because, I was aware that Mr. Deli Priscoli, that you were, involved in discussions with the Conservation Commission, on a particular issue. And I felt that it would be beneficial to everybody for, that matter to be cleared up satisfactorily, as I understand it has been, before the, historic brought whatever thoughts or ideas we had to you. I will say that just as a casually and anecdotally, as somebody who walks by the property on Main Street and also on the Sudbury Reservoir Trail, so I pass to the south of it and walk by on Deerfoot and Parkerville, sorry, I had a moment. Somebody who walks by there all the time with my wife and dog, and I couldn't be more delighted with the progress that you've made on the house. It looks absolutely gorgeous. The grounds are shaping up absolutely beautifully. And, I know it's, come at great expense of time and effort and passion, blood, sweat, tears, all that. And I think the property, the town of Southborough, just as a kind of blanket statement, is getting a good deal here. And I think the town has a lot to be proud of and happy about in terms of your stewardship of the property so far. So what I was, interested in doing, and I think there are some members that we do have some questions about it and interest in the progress that you're making and how things are going forward. So the first thing I would like to do is just ask you, if you would, just to talk as much as you'd like about the progress and how you're making out and how things are going. I know, for instance, there was one, covenant on here about time and all that stuff, but, nobody could anticipate COVID, all the supply chain disruptions, all the disruptions in labor supply and materials and all that kind of stuff that anybody who's tried to do any renovations, that would include some family members of mine, have encountered over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I know the challenge has been really substantial, and I think maybe delayed some items longer than certainly you would have liked. But my understanding is that you're in the house now, living, I hope, happily, and would just like to hear you talk about where you're at in the project, where you're at in the progress, and where you have things that, I know, for instance, in the back, you're still working on the atrium and the things that you're still working on, or that, that you still are trying to see through to a completion of the vision.
Okay, well, nice to meet everybody. Yeah, I don't recognize, I've met you, Kevin, I think once or twice, but everybody looks new to me. I dealt with Joe. I forgot his last name. What was his last name, Michael? Joe Hubley was who I primarily dealt with, who was really out on the site when we were working on it in the early days. I'm sure everybody on the board knows the history about how the house was in peril there for a bit. And, we took it on. The $970,000 represents a stake in the property, which is a demolition prohibition. It also includes the fact that there was 4 lots and there's 1 lot, and there was consideration on my end that was given up for that exceeded the 970,000. So it wasn't, it was a long drawn out negotiation, and Joe Hubley and others on your side that are no longer selectmen, but they were at the time, Paul Semino and one other gentleman. Worked hard. What's that?
Rooney,
that's right. John Rooney worked hard to negotiate, the details to everybody's satisfaction, and we ended up with a deal that was not everything for anybody. Everybody gave and got something, gave something type thing. And I explained to the board at the time that in the best circumstances you're looking at to do a renovation. I don't think anybody typically really understood what this house required, which is the reason nobody bought it over the years, because to do the house correctly is a incredible task, not for the faint of heart. You need 3 things. You need, obviously the knowledge how to do it, which I have. I've done other major restorations elsewhere in Massachusetts. You need the passion and the understanding of the period, which I know. And the third thing you need is the resources, which I have, and I have a lot less of now after doing it. But in any case, it was a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of money. And so, that's what was required to do the project. So here we are, you know, I mentioned to them, I think it was 6 years, if I don't remember the exact time, the project really couldn't get started until the money was tendered and everything was sealed, and that was late in 2016. I forgot the exact date when it really launched, but it wasn't at the date when it was voted. It took several months after that to dot the i's with the town councils, and I'm sure you've all been through that type of thing contractually, and it takes forever. So, you know, realistically, the project kicked off in the late fall, I would say, of 2016, and then has been worked on continuously daily ever since. That's the reality of it. And there was 5 buildings that were done here. The first building that was completed was the chapel, and then we completed the cottage, the guest cottage, and then we completed the carriage house, which, you know, for those of you that haven't been there, you know, the walls were out 1.5 feet, the ceiling was down 2 feet. I mean, the building was within a year of just virtual collapse. There was nothing there. It was all infested with raccoons. It really, by all rights, should have been torn down and rebuilt. But the commitment I made was to restore it, which I did, which required lifting the building up, artificially holding up the roof so the walls could be pulled in. It's very costly and very time consuming, and you know, highly. This is not, you know, for your typical framer that would be building a new house. This, you had to have people that understood how to, you know, secure civil engineer. I mean, structural engineers. It was a complicated thing, but it was done. It came out really, really nice. And then the main house continued on after that, and then the what I call the gatehouse, which I created, in which when we talked to the commission originally, was to basically conceal in an architecturally significant way all the infrastructure that's required to run this property. You know, all the mechanicals and everything else funnels through that building, including the generator and all that, but it's disguised nicely in there. So it looks like it was there from day one. So that had to be done to kind of hide the modern utilities that you had to have to run the house. You could not run it on the prior utilities that came here. The house and the carriage house both required to be sprinklered by the fire department. So there's a huge water main. There's an 8-inch water main that was put in from the street. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You know, I don't know how much detail you want me to get into, but it was just a major undertaking. Where the pond was a wet area that during the spring had standing water in it, and really that's where the water wants to be. So we decided to embellish that into a pond and give it that architectural value, and with a fountain and everything to give it, and also acts as the site's drainage. So it serves a lot of things. It creates a lot of wildlife there and other things. It's very nice. And so there was a lot of different elements, and you know, it was a complicated conservation thing. You had mentioned the conservation piece early in your discussion tonight. You know, that was involved. It went over numerous years. There was, you know, disagreements, but they were all, you know, one way or another negotiated, and everything's done. And we're at the stage right now where we've given them a partial as-built and everything. And now the civil engineer is finishing up. I think the as-bilt's basically finished. He's just checking it, and that would be the full as-built. The only thing left from a site work perspective, and I just ran out of time this year, and was the final topping on the road, the internal roads, which is going to be kind of an exposed aggregate, which is a fancy way of saying a stone that's basically basically sprinkled on top of asphalt, and then you know, rolled into the asphalt, so it appears to be natural stone, but in reality it's a impervious solid surface, so you can, you know, live with it during the winter here in the New England. That's the last element of any major anything here as far as, you know, outside site work, let's say. The landscaping is basically complete other than maintenance. There's a few more trees, a couple of trees died, small ones that were newer that died from some disease, have to be replaced in the spring. Along the up by the house, you can't really see it from the street, but they're there. There's 2 or 3 of the hornbeams that have some kind of a disease that have to be fixed. And I keep improving on the roses and things like that, and adding, and you know, there's a few little tweaks on the landscaping, but nothing of any magnitude that anybody would even notice, other than myself. And then you mentioned the last element to be finished is the solarium or green room, you know, sunroom. And that was very complicated design wise to make it work with the house and make it look like it always was here. And I had to match the stone, so I quarried more stone on the site to match the veneer stone that's on the main house. And you know, so it was very complicated, and yeah, there were some delays. You know, basically the country went off a cliff in 2020, and you know, everything was difficult. And typically, the state, even the governor at the time, Baker, told all the permits for 2 years. You know, everything got extended for a couple of years. I mean, just about everything, everywhere that was, you know, real estate related, you know, from a construction or permitting standpoint, because of the delays and because everybody, you know, everybody just evaporated like overnight. And you know, people, you know, some people still are not back to work, or what, I don't know where they went, really. They just evaporated. But you know, the house is substantially complete. The main house is, all the first 3 floors are 100% inside, and not that the inside was ever a concern of this commission, but they're done. The exterior has been done for some time. I mean, you know, the magnitude of the masonry restoration was a 2-year project. That was the first thing we did. And that project was just to fix the masonry on the house and the chapel was over $1 million. Just that one aspect, just to give you some magnitude. I mean, the mechanical system in the house, the heating system alone, and the heating and cooling system was $800,000. So that's the magnitude of what we're talking about here. So it's you know, the amount of money that, you know, the house was originally purchased for, and the CR that was sold, you know, sold to the town, is really a fraction of what it took to do the house. Not to mention years of my own personal time. But where we are right now is the first, the 3 floors are done. The cottage is 100%, the carriage house 100%, the chapel's 100%, the gatehouse is 100%. The basements still have to be finished at some point. I'm not in any rush to do that. They're roughed in, the plumbing's in there and everything. And the pool is in, all that's in. So really, it's just finishing up that sunroom and then the final surface wearing coat on the asphalt, and normal maintenance. That's it.
So are you John, are you waiting on glass for the sunroom conservatory?
Well, the windows are all in. The windows are all in now. And then the next thing is they're fabricating the skylight. Is a 3-piece skylight that has to be fabricated out of steel and then glazed. It's very complicated, but that goes on top of it. And then so that's put on like think of it like a coffee can, and that's the lid that, you know, snaps on top of the carrot. But the interior can all be finished and everything else. So that will be put on sometime in the late winter, early spring. That one last little thing put on there with a crane. It's being built right now, and but I had to really get the building right where you can't. There's no measure. There's no room for any kind of mistake on that. You know, you have to have that right dead on measurement wise, and the only way to do that is to get everything else built. I put a temporary roof on it anyway for right now, so you know, the whole thing is weather tight. But and then the underneath that is the drive-in garage. There's a single car garage, and a garage and a half, let's call it. And then there's some other, you know, like storage areas for lawnmowers and things of that nature. And then access into the basement where the elevator is to go up to the kitchen with groceries and things like that. The elevator took the place of the servant stairway throughout the house, all 4. So it services 4 floors: the basement, and the 3 floors above. And then there's a main staircase in the house, which remains. And you know, the whole house has been I mean, everything's done. I mean, it's you know, it's a work of art, really.
And just to clarify for the board and for people who might be watching, that what you described as the gatehouse, this is the structure as you look at, let's say, the house, you're standing at the driveway on Deerfoot. This is the structure just to the left,
right
between the driveway and the pond.
Yeah, that had to be done in order to conceal 300 kW generator. That's massive. It's as big as a, you know, small pickup truck. That's in there. you know, that there's a
And
general.
that's where you had there was, you know, it's not our concern tonight, but you had some issue with infringement on an easement, right?
Well, that was an arbitrary line that was drawn by the you know, by somebody, Garfield or somebody prior to me, and it really meant nothing in the sense of reality. But what drove that whole thing to be there is NSTAR or NSTAR or whoever it was said this is where the underground has to go and be terminated, and put the, you know, you don't see it, but there's a transformer behind there, and that has to have bollards, and there's a containment tank. I mean, it's all the stuff that you know, you don't want to see in a historic renovation, so it all had to be concealed. And then all that stuff comes through a structural slab, and then that's fed into the generator and into the main house. I mean, you know, it's very complicated. There's all kinds of fire services and alarms and annunciation panels and, you know, lawn sprinklers. There's a well for the irrigation in there. It's a real, you know, it's a web of utilities in there, and you don't want to, you can't just put that out in the weather. It has to be, you know, it has to all be, you know, concealed. I mean, the generator can be in the weather, but who the hell wants to look at that on a historic renovation? I mean,
Right.
you know, you don't mind seeing it on a hospital or something, but you don't want to see
no.
it on this. So that house was built and permitted and approved by everybody, including the conservation at the time, but nobody realized the line was infringed on. But we're only talking a couple of 100 feet. I mean, square feet. And what I did for the board's benefit, since you've opened up that question, I gave them 2.5 times more restricted area than was actually infringed on. So the town, or whoever is in the benefit, I think the conservation is the benefactor of that, came out 2.5 times ahead of where they were. So, I mean, nothing's ever going to be further built on the property. So that was fine with me to protect everything. I mean, really, the concept of that, I think, was to protect the large tree that's there. And that large tree, just so you know, I've had the top Rolf. What's the name of his company, Michael? Rolf Tree.
Excuse me, tree specialist Rolf Briggs.
He does all the work at, like, for instance, at the for the big cemetery that in Watertown, the Olmsted did, and all, you know, all those Mount Auburn Cemetery. He's the guy they call for all the monumental. So I called him. He's like double the money of anybody, but he's the most knowledgeable. I had him come in, and I've put at least 25 grand into that tree between pruning, special things, and everything else. The tree is getting old. The tree is failing. It is not dead, but it is dying a very slow death. Is it going to last another 100 years? No, it's not. Hopefully it'll last my lifetime. But the tree, I've done everything humanly possible to preserve that tree. And so that restriction that you see there, that was originally placed there, my reading of it, I think it was to protect the tree, you know, from being built on or torn down or cut down, I should say. So we've improved upon that and gave more restricted area, but basically the whole lot's restricted anyway, you know, so it's not like you can go build, you know, additional houses or cut things down or demolish anything. You can't. So no would you? So, you know, I mean, who would ever do that at this point? So so that's really what it meant. But the town came out ahead on that, 2.5 to 1. So, which is fine. It was a nice solution. I think everybody's happy, and that's kind of where that is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that, you know, that all worked out well for all parties concerned.
Right.
So,
I mean, it was improved, it was inspected, it was signed off by the town. So, you know, you can't come back and say, oh, you shouldn't be there. I mean, you know, so it was a complicated thing. I think the whole site was overly complicated, you know, with all kinds of, you know, like that's a typical example of how complicated it was. I mean, nobody envisioned, you know, what it was going to take, you know, to really make that work. So, but all those things are done. And like I said, once the Conservation Commission gets the as-built, they're going to sign off and give what's called a certificate of compliance for the whole site. And that gets recorded, and that puts that to bed, you know, permanently, unless you want to do other work or something. And I don't think there's any other work to do. We have all the rights to maintain everything. So as long as I can maintain it, everything, and not have to, you know, there's not going to be any further construction of any magnitude unless there's some kind of a, you know, catastrophic weather event or something, you know. But other than that, I can't imagine that, that one big burst that when that house burnt down on Sears Road, that day when that happened, there was a huge, trees came down, the whole trees, wires, everything came down, and it just missed the carriage house by literally 6 inches. So, something like that could cause more construction. But other than that, the construction's done.
Great. Well, I thank you for that. And what I'd like to do now is give everybody, a chance on the commission. We'll just go around and see who has questions. I think I'll hold mine till the end, but I think we should start with our vice chair, Annie, and see if you have any questions you'd like to put to Mr. Deli Priscoli. You're muted.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the background here. It's really incredible what you've done. I love, driving past your property every day. I personally think it has added so much to our town. And, personally, I'm extremely grateful for all of your hard work and investment over the last several years, on what you're doing at 84 Main Street. So thank you. And thank you for being here tonight as well. I don't have any really pressing questions. Others on the commission, may have, other things to bring up. I would just like to voice that I would love to see the home up close and personal at some point. I know perhaps there's, been talks about a tour or some events or whatever, but I would love that opportunity just to, kind of see it closer, and kind of evaluate it without, trespassing, if you will. So that's kind of what I would like to add to the conversation tonight. And I'm sure my other commissioners will have more comments to add.
May I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
So to answer your question about access, I did host in 2019, just prior to COVID, a Christmas festival in the chapel. And the people were free to come to that, and there was, it was a fun time. And
that was part of the historic house tour, right?
Yes,
Yes.
it was. And then, and since then, I stayed in touch with one of the Burnett descendants, and they have this annual meeting every 2 years at the cemetery there that they own or whatever. And Michael and Paul Semino assisted me in hosting about 50 people. I don't know. Is that about right?
No, it was like 50 people. It's all
They do a tour of the house, so I gave them a tour of I had promised that to one of the Burnett folks. So I did open it up to them to come over one Saturday, and they walked through the house, and they spent a couple hours there, I'd say. And so I did give them a tour as a courtesy to the Burnett descendants.
And I will say that we, as the society, we're planning to do, hopefully, a Christmas thing, which John has really generously agreed to participate in, a sort of a 19th century Christmas celebration with carolers and all sorts of other things. We just could not get it organized because we are so still involved in this move to Fayetteville. The season just kept, just creeped right up on us, and we realized that it was, we didn't want to do it in a half-assed sort of way. So we're going to start replanning that again for 2024, and it seems like an impossibility that that's even a year. John and I are going to start to do a powwow in August to really do something really nice that will open up the grounds and the carriage house, and activities for the kids and caroling and all sorts of other stuff, because John does love Christmas.
I have the largest Christmas.
I'd love to go to that.
He's like Mr. Christmas. You should see the stuff he has in storage. Man, oh man. Starting with that life-size crash that he had specially ordered somewhere. Oh my God. Yeah.
So what we're doing is I'm friendly with the orchestra director of the Claflin Symphony Orchestra, which is a regional orchestra that's based in Milford, and they're really nice. It's like a Boston Pops type thing, and all the players and all the musicians are from major orchestras like that, and they also do this. So I was going to have, you know, a few pieces of the orchestra there and carolers and really do it up nice, and then provide cappuccino and you know, cannolis or tiramisu or something nice, or scones. I don't know. We'll think about it. You know, and coffee and tea in the carriage house. So they'd come in, folks would come in, enjoy the, you know, a 19th century experience in the chapel, sing along with the carolers and the string music, and then come into the carriage house and have refreshments and get to know their neighbors without, you know, having this burden of Walmart and Target hanging over their head, and go back to what Christmas is really about, which is about talking to your neighbors and you reconnecting with your family, instead of the over commercialization, which really nauseates me personally. But in any case, I wanted to have that, and you know, and so it would be nice, but I want to do it right, and I was going to do it over in, you know, a couple of events, you know, maybe a matinee and then one evening event, and I'm working with that orchestra, and they have carolers and a harpist, and I was going to have a harpist where the cappuccino in the carriage house, and make it very special for people, and you know, there'd be a fee for it, but I was going to use it as a way to generate money for good causes in the town, like the historical commission and other things, and you know, just cover our expenses, and whatever's left over would go to something worthwhile, like that, and I'd provide the property for that, and that would give people a chance to have access, you know, to part of it anyway.
I would jump in on that and just say that, I think you would get very enthusiastic reception from people in town, obviously, because I think there's a real desire to participate in those kinds of events, which of course are, you know, entirely at your discretion, and not covered in the preservation restriction. One thing that is mentioned in the PR, and we posted this, so it's on page 13 if anybody's, you know, singing along at home, is that clause about, John, that it says, you know, to foster educational opportunity and instill continued appreciation of the buildings of historical significance and the protected land, all this capitalized, only during the ownership of the premises by the current trustee of grantor, that would be you, and his immediate family members. Current grantors shall consider and do their best to accommodate 2 educational tours of the grounds each calendar year for Southborough students in the accompaniment of teachers, proctors, or adult volunteers. All such visits or other visits to relevant portions of the premises may be allowed by the current grantor, shall be at the current grantor's discretion, which is a very lawyerly way of saying it's at, you know, it's at your option. But I'd like to specifically bring this up as a sort of formal request that in 2024, at your convenience and when we can, you know, mutually work this out, that you consider these tours for Southborough students. I think it would really, and I would say as an aside to this, you know, a couple of months ago, I mentioned this on one of our calls, that I was contacted by a group of Southborough middle school students, very enthusiastic about Southborough history and wanting to know more, and wanting to know specifically how the Historical Commission operated. And you know, I answered them in great detail. And actually, this is also one of the mandates that the Historical Commission is under from the master plan committee folks, that they expect us to take an active role in education. So, you know, you would be helping us out, and also, you know, abiding by a provision, albeit a kind of loosely worded one, in the PR. If you would consider, you know, next year, a couple of tours, they might be both on the same day, for students in Southborough. I imagine, you know, elementary, perhaps middle school students, who I think would really, you know, learn a lot about Joseph Burnett, learn a lot about the property, and learn a lot about the role, frankly, of government in helping, in partnership with a private individual, you know, save, you know, this critical piece of Southborough history, the home of our, you know, I think without much dispute, our most famous descendant. So is that something you'd be open to, you know, actually getting going in the coming year?
Yeah, I would work with you and Michael, I guess, on that if Michael's willing, because he's working on educational programs in general. I mean, I do, it is my personal residence. COVID kind of killed the whole idea of renting rooms and all that. I just don't, really want to go through that and have that. I mean, a lot of people I know that were in the hospitality business got wiped out, have never recovered, from the whole
Well,
thing.
and at the way this,
And just so your board understands and you understand, I've put, my wife and I are voracious art collectors and things of that nature, and the house is, there's a lot of contents in there, and
Yeah, I don't think, John, they're talking about the house. I mean,
yeah, no,
let me just,
but we could do the chapel, we could do the gardens, we could do maybe have a little refreshments for the kids or something simple in the carriage house. I mean, I want to make it special, I mean, if we're going to do it.
we used to do this every year. The society did at the flag school pre-COVID, because the third graders all have a Southborough history element, and so we would have the successive classes. And it was really quite something, because we would do the same presentation 8 times in a row over the course of a day, because there were 8 groups that would come marching around. But they march all around, and they do what's called the Holy Hill, the church, the flag school, the town hall, all sorts of stuff. So one could envision this, I think, fairly easily as part of that. That requires, obviously coordination with that stuff. And it also requires something that, we've stalled with at the society, which is the completion of this historical walking tour. Again, I'm going to just simply beg off and simply say that, we've been so consumed with Fayetteville.
Which I was willing to participate in, if you remember.
Yes, exactly. Which, which was another one of those things. And actually, we did do it. We did actually come, I think, oh God, where was it? It must have been either pre-COVID or right early on. We did in the fall a whole thing. St. Mark's was kind enough to give us access to their land, and we did the Choate House. We did 84 Main Street. We ended at the Sears Mansion. We walked our way all back around again. By the way, just as an aside, if you have a chance to go to the MFA to see the Sargent and Fashion exhibit, you will see quite a number of references to Helen Sears of Sears Road fame, who was a phenomenal artist in her own right, a friend of Sargent. And her studio was located there on Sears Road, right across from John's house. So there's a lot of Southborough history actually floating around in that exhibit, which closes right after Christmas. I was just there today, so it was it's really quite something to see.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Sargent, because I have 2 young women paintings that were painted by Phoebe Jenks. If you look up Phoebe Jenks, she was the understudy to Sargent and focused on painting young women. And so there's studio of Sargent paintings here, and they're of the Draper children from the Draper factory in Hopedale. And those hang in the house.
Interesting.
Those are 2 very, very important paintings, and they're in the house. That's the kind of thing that's in here. Those are interesting, along with, Gilbert Stewart's and all kinds of other interesting artists.
Helen Sears is actually quite, someone who should actually be taught, frankly, because she was a really leading advocate. She essentially founded the whole Boston School, which was an entire brand.
And all that,
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's something that, that's a whole long other story. But so, yes. So I think.
Yeah, I mean, we could choreograph that together if there's a, little subcommittee. I don't know on your end, Mr. Miller, who you'd want to on your end.
I think this can be worked out directly. I mean, and I'm happy to, have the Historical Society's, participation or collaboration in this, and work with Michael, and the 3 of us can quite easily. It's a matter of, just contacting the schools and you saying when you're available, when it can be done. You put the parameters on it that you want to have and that you feel comfortable with. I mean, the PR is very clear that it encourages these things as a matter of policy. And so I'm obliged to pursue it, but that it is at your discretion. If, the limits you want to place on it in terms of grounds only, public spaces maybe in the house or not, in just the chapel, the carriage house, perhaps the cottage, that's at your discretion. And we can work out the details very easily. It's just a matter of, I wanted to bring it up as something that I think would go a long way with the townsfolk. I'd be very happy to know that their kids are, getting access and getting to see, the tremendous work that's been done on the property. Again, it would help us with our mandate with the master plan.
Well, we'll figure something out.
We'll work it out. Great, thank you for that. I want to go back to our membership. Jim, do you have any questions?
No questions. John, I was in the last review a year or so ago when you came to the commission, and I think I said then, and I'll say it again, you've done a fabulous job. The attention to detail going way over and above, I think, what anybody expected in the restoration.
Thank you.
During the accuracy down to the colors and the styles and the materials and all that. I was able to visit that. Joe Hubley and I came over one evening a couple Decembers ago, and I saw the chapel, and that's an indication of the kind of work you've done. It's gorgeous inside now. So just my thanks for your dedication to doing this well.
Grant?
Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
Thanks
how are
thanks for being here and for your presentation. It was very informative. I do have a couple questions in looking through the PR. I'm not sure if we were thinking about getting into this kind of thing tonight, or if this is more of just kind of an overview, but I believe it was last year we had a brief, which was the only time during my time on the commission that we discussed 84 Main Street. We had a brief discussion, the Historical Commission did, about the arborvitae on the Deerfoot side of the property. And we had a brief discussion, I don't think it was more than 10 minutes or if that, about whether or not the arborvitae are blocking the view from Deerfoot Road. And so that's just a concern that I have been, I've had it over this last year thinking about it. Yeah, I was just
I can respond to that if you want.
wondering if you could talk to that
Actually,
a bit. And
I'd actually answer that because I was the person who wrote that. So I actually was involved as a member and also as an unofficial intermediary between the Board of Selectmen at the time, Rooney and Semino, and Mr. Della Pascoli and his legal representative, to try to come to some common ground, because at one point this had stalled. So I was the person who essentially wrote that language, and the intent was not to go into a Newport kind of setting where the house was behind huge walls with gigantic plantings that could not be seen from any vista except perhaps by going through the gate. The open view of that and the landscape view of that was very critical, I think, because it always had been open like that. Of course, there was Deerfoot Farms behind it. So the intent was not to block the view of the property in its entirety. In this case, this arborvitae hedge, and I was on the commission at the time when Joe Hubley was chair, was approved by the Historical Commission simply because Deerfoot Road at that point and Route 30 actually sit at the second story level of the house. So as you round the corner of that property with headlights, you are in full view of all the windows of the front bedrooms, of the front rooms, etc. So John came to us at the time and said, it's my intention to put a limited line here to simply get the headlights out of our house. And that was deemed to be a completely reasonable request because, frankly, that this house, unlike any other in Southborough, can literally be seen from 300 degrees. I mean, you can walk down Deerfoot Road, you can walk across the reservoir, you can walk up Parkerville, you can walk up Route 30. So as something that I think is an essential to a certain level of privacy and living in that house, it certainly did not violate and does not violate the intent of what we were intending when that preservation restriction was installed.
I'd also
Thanks,
like to
Michael.
add, I'd also like
go
to
ahead.
add, Grant, if I may, something I didn't tell you before is that if you may or may not recall that the little corner where Route 30 or Main Street intersects with Deerfoot there, that corner that now houses the little pocket park that you see that I did, that was basically a place for McDonald's bags, beer cans, and nips being tossed out windows of cars as they drove by. It was just, I had to go out there and pick up the trash literally every day, that people would just toss in there when it was kind of a no man's land. And so I mentioned to the board, I said, let's make an arrangement where I take ownership of that corner and can make it something worthwhile. And that's when I came up with the concept of the clock and some benches and some lights in a viewing area. So really, and this is not part of that preservation thing we're talking about, but this was added by me as a place that people could sit, look at a sign that tells a little history of the house. There was a thing that you mentioned about the tour. There was going to be the little scan thing on your cell phone, so it would tell you the history of the house. You could actually listen to an oral history or something or read it. And you'd sit there, and people do it. They sit at those benches and they just sit there. They take a break from jogging or walking their dog or just whatever, pushing the baby carriage around. They sit there and they look at the house and they have a great view and they really suck up the view. And that's a lot more productive and it's a lot better for society to have that corner there maintained at my expense, even though I now have a 99-year lease on it, but the point is that it really maintained everything and it cleans up the corner and gives people a little something to walk to, and people love having conversations there. I've met a lot of people there when I'm there gardening and stuff, and they all love the park. And I see people sitting there out my bedroom window, they're sitting there with their neighbors and chatting, and we're taking a break from walking the dog or whatever, and they like the clock and they look at the and that's where the creche is on that side over there, and then the little historical markers there, and it's a nice little spot that wasn't contemplated originally, but I did it on my own with no help from the town other than the fact that they gave me the lease on the corner. I mean, there was no sweat off them to do that. I mean, it was somebody spending money on town property, so why wouldn't they? But unlike other places in town where town has to spend money on other people's property, I spent my money on the town's property. So I made that corner. So that was kind of but Michael's right. The headlights, he summed it up beautifully. I'm not going to repeat it, but it was unbearable the way it was because people were coming down from Westboro that direction towards Southboro and just blinding the house. So I just couldn't have that. That's why I asked for that.
Thanks. And Michael, do you happen to remember what year around what time that was? That I know it's been a long time.
No, I know, I
Okay.
don't.
Yeah,
16 or 17, somewhere in there. 15.
Yeah, I mean, so John and Joe and I walked property in order to set out the perimeters of the landscape plan at the time, because we also reviewed that when it was originally up. And it would have been somewhere around that issue, around that time. But again, I'd really just, this goes to what the spirit of this agreement was, which was to leave the house a visible asset to the town. And I don't think this impinges in any sort of way. I live on Route 85. I am surrounded by as many trees as I possibly can. And to the extent that that house is I mean, he's frankly, John's on stage there. I mean, because you could see his house from every side. So John, invest in drapes.
Thank you.
Michelle.
I'm going to be brief because my computer is about to run out of battery. I am signed on as an attendee on my phone, but I have to say thank you so much. I actually had the privilege of going to tour the property before it went up for auction, and I wish that I had the money to do what you did because it is truly something to be admired from everybody in the town. So thank you for saving it.
Thank you. Thank you for appreciating it.
Yes.
Kelly.
Hi, John. I'm Kelly. Just gonna piggyback off of what everyone else said. And as everyone was talking, I was trying to think of the right words. I think what you did, reinvigorating the property, it opened the door to historic intrigue. When I started reading everything about the house, I wanted to know about the Burnett family and what else could I learn about Southborough. So I really think that you opened a gateway, but just by reinvigorating the house.
Well, thank you. It took a lot out of me, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I really did. I don't think I could do it. I have another big one left in me right now, but
Come on, you're not dead yet.
But I just, it was a lot of work, and my wife and I, it was a lot of work, and still, finishing off the last little elements. I'm ready to have people leave the property and, kind of be left alone, by workmen and things like that. So it's nice. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it, and I'm glad it's there. I mean, I'm into historic renovation. I'm into historic preservation. I'm heavily involved at the Wayside Inn in Sudbury. It's my pet thing. I'm the longest serving trustee there to this day, and so I think things that are icons like that are important. I think this house, obviously it was made clear to me that the house is extremely important to the town, and so I knew what it was going to take to do the house. I mean, I knew, so I don't think most people have a clue what it would take, but it took a lot.
Well, what you did, it showed the effort that you put into it really shows. And I'm a townie, and it's just, you've made it look beautiful. So thank you.
I'm glad it's there for everybody to enjoy. We enjoy being there, and and we don't live there the whole time. I split my time for other places. We have places, but I'm there. And I'm glad you like it. I really am. I'm glad it's there for the town, and I'm looking forward to these Christmas festivals and getting people back into the true meaning of Christmas in the 19th century, and having the nice orchestra there and everything would be beautiful. So something you don't see every day.
All set. Kelly, anything else?
No, that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you. Michelle,
Thank
just procedurally, if your connection fails on the computer, you're on the iPhone KRHKHC, that's you?
That's me.
So you have to come over that way. I'll rename you as
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, and we'll have some continuity. John, I mean, I think what you're hearing is very broad and sincere appreciation, for everything you've done and plan to continue to do. And for instance, in your comments about the little seating area at the corner of Main and Deerfoot, that's a place that I've sat myself more than once and enjoyed it and appreciated it. And I like the clock. Posted a photo of the clock and got a comment from the people that make those clocks. What is it, down in Medfield?
It is at Medfield, yeah. Yeah,
and they have a clock museum, and so we're fans. I do want to go back to something that Grant was talking about, because I think it offer a certain perspective on this. I've been down and I've looked many times very carefully at that corner, and I understand, for instance, the trouble with the elevation, headlights, turning. There is a lot of other screening in that area, and the arborvitae that run roughly 130 feet along Deerfoot. The question is, if you were concerned about an eastbound moving car on Main taking a ride onto Deerfoot heading south, is 130 feet of arborvitae that may top out at 50 or 60 feet necessary to provide what I agree is reasonable relief from headlights and a reasonable expectation of privacy that everybody has. And rather than hair split about some of the rhetoric at this point, that the problem with amendments that, or, verbal agreements that I've been given to understand have been made, is that unfortunately I have to operate, and the whole commission has to operate within the four corners of the written agreement unless it is amended. And so, and when I read a line that says no perimeter fencing or tall hedges shall be placed on the property blocking the view, period, full stop. I have to, I'm obliged, I'm sorry, but I'm obliged to think about that. And for instance, when the issue of the fence came up, I actually, for what it's worth, came to your defense quite vigorously, because there were people that were saying, oh, that's blocking the view. And I went down and measured, and I said, you people are absurd. It's a very handsome fence. I can see the merits of it, both to unify the gates from a public safety standpoint, because you don't want people falling off the stone wall on Main Street, and it in no wise blocks the view. But with regard to the kind of line of arborvitae, I mean, the concern of the PR in its rhetoric is to, it talks about pruning and maintenance required to maintain the viewscapes of the buildings of historical significance from Parkerville Road, Deerfoot Road, and Main Street. It doesn't address the south side of the property that would be visible, let's say, from the trail on the other side of the reservoir. So, I do share with Grant some long-term concern about, as the vegetation matures. Again, I'm obliged by my position to make sure that the town doesn't see a diminishing return on its investment. And the way I would put it to you is that you have spent, and will continue to spend, I know, a great deal of time, again, money, effort, love, commitment, to this property and making it as beautiful as possible. And my appeal to you would be that I think the goal of the landscaping should be to frame the beauty of the property in the best possible way, but not to obscure it beyond a limited point that provides you with a reasonable. Nobody wants to have headlights blaring into their dining room. I think we could all accept and understand that. So, I don't know if this will be resolved tonight. I don't think so, but I would like you to take under advisement, and all of us to think about ways that we could be partners and talk about making sure that all the hard work and all the beauty you put into the property in terms of restoration is framed in a way that allows you a reasonable sense of privacy and allows the people of the town to appreciate what you've done. And so I see it, you know what I mean? I hope this is taken, it's meant in the spirit of, I take pride in the property. I know you do, obviously, and I want to see it shown to its best advantage. And I do share Grant's concern that 130 feet of a 50-foot ultimately tall line of trees may not be to the best advantage of this stunning property that I want people to be able to view, again, without unduly impinging on your privacy. And it's funny, I live in a house that is a good deal more modest than the Burnett Mansion, but that occasionally, as I sit in my office, and maybe the flowers have come in on a summer day, where people will stop, and actually I've seen people take pictures of my house, and it's quite pleasing in a certain way and flattering. And I think, well, I got to get out and mow the lawn and keep it looking good. So, I mean, but you have a weird feeling the first time it happens, because you want your privacy, and I have far less buffer than you have. But it is a thought, and I hope that we can have a kind of fruitful conversation about this going forward. You know, and find a way, as things mature, again, to preserve something that we all greatly value, and I hope you heard that sense of appreciation.
No, I appreciate that, but I'm going to tell you that, you know, that is, I need that, and that was discussed, and I think I've overcompensated for it by giving the park there, which gives people a chance to sit and contemplate and not just walk by the place with no place to sit and actually dwell. And so I think whatever's been offset by some, you know, and I think there's no part in the property you can't see from numerous angles. And then you could see there and sit in front there and really enjoy it and just sit there for 15 or 20 minutes. That was never contemplated in the document that you're talking about. So what you have to understand is that, you know, that there was a moment in time, and then it was modified, and things were decided, and things were added, and things were, you know, modified around. But in the end result, I don't think anybody would argue that it's far better for the townspeople, because they can sit there and enjoy the property and contemplate. Hopefully you get those scanner things done at some point in time, and people can actually read about the history and actually sit there for 30 minutes or 20 minutes and hear about the history and the little girls that marched over there when it was going to be torn down and that whole thing. And you know, just kind of all the color that was behind Joseph Burnett and everything else, and that little park and cleaning up that corner and giving people a chance to dwell and really enjoy the house is a hell of a lot more than just glancing down Deerfoot, which really impedes on my quality of life. I just, you know,
Well, and let me interject again, as the only surviving member of the board commission who actually was party to this and who actually was the author of this. That privacy planting is not a hedge under any sort of landscape definition. A hedge is a manicured row of plantings that is deliberately designed as a wall to exclude visual or privacy concerns. So, you know, again, when we looked at this, and 130 feet on an overall boundary of, I don't know, what is the total perimeter? 1,000 feet?
Thousands of feet.
Yeah, thousands of feet. You know, Kevin, I understand your concern, but I can guarantee you that was not our intention in writing this, and it really shouldn't be a contention now. And if to put this to bed, then maybe the commission should vote that is indeed the understanding. And I'm happy to provide a certified letter to say that was what actually happened. If we can track down Joe Hubley, I think that we can agree to that too. But I don't think it's fair to really use this as a sledge at this point. I mean, it's, you know, this is a done deal.
Wait.
I don't think we're using anything as a
I gotta
sledge,
stop
Michael.
you to say that this is not being used as a sledge. This is being advanced as a conversation about ongoing pruning and maintenance required to maintain viewscapes of the buildings of historic significance. That's what the document says. It's pretty straightforward English. So
I know I wrote it.
What, well,
I know what it says. I wrote it.
If so, then you understand that the preservation restriction is an ongoing, living, breathing document that we are all bound by. We're bound by it just as Mr. Jelly Priscoli is bound by it, and that the terms of it, as I understand it very clearly, are going to involve a continuing dialogue between the parties to make sure that we stay within the bounds of it. And all I'm saying is, for instance, in the 3 years since those trees were planted, the viewscape has altered substantially. I'm not saying anything beyond that at this point. I'm simply trying to set the groundwork for what I think the document clearly states has to be an ongoing conversation about the evolution of the property due to the landscape, and to ensure that the people of Southborough continue to get what they think they bargained for, which is the ability to appreciate the magnificent building that this is, and I will add from my view, I want to take as flexible as an approach to that as possible, because I do believe that Mr. Deli Priscoli has a reasonable expectation of privacy and the peaceful enjoyment of his home, just as all of us do. So it's not.
What I'm asking you though is so what is the actual issue? Are you asking him to remove the plantings, or to trim them, or what are you asking here?
What I'm saying is that it is all the plantings have already evolved very substantially, and I do think it's sort of hair splitting to say that a continuous line of arborvitae that are planted so close that there's now no gap between any of those trees does not amount to a hedge. That's what people plant them for. They're hedging plants.
That's not a hedge. And so
I think honestly, if I may add, to me, the bigger concern for you folks maybe, or something you might want to think about, is, my property extends all the way over to Parkerville Road, right? You know that, right? That the property, even though the town took an easement when they did the Main Street reconstruction and made a mess over there, which they were obligated to put the proper trees back, they never did. They never got rid of the invasive species. They ruined the view. The worst view of the whole thing is you're looking at weeds and poison ivy and everything else. And nobody ever does anything about that. And that's really on the town's shoulders. And Karen Galligan knew that. I have a voicemail that I've saved in my phone when she was still in office there, saying, oh, we're going to try to get there and honor our agreement, but, we just haven't been able to do it because something's wrong with a contractor and whatever, on the Main Street thing. I don't know all the details and what, I don't know all that. But what I'm pointing out to you is, I think there's two things that really need to be addressed that need to be looked at. One is that needs to be fixed. So the view from Parkerville Road, where people actually do park and watch soccer games and things, would get a much better view and a much more enjoyment of the property. And maybe some benches could be put over there as well. I think that, but it looks like hell right now. And that's completely the town's fault that they were obligated to do that. And that's in my agreement. They owe me 6 major monumental street trees and all kinds. And that there's not supposed to be any weeds or anything else. They're supposed to be, mowed, type thing. So you'd look over a whole sculpted area. So you get the view. That's something I think that would be very productive to resolve, and I'd be happy to help with that. But I think that's super important, and that's not even been brought up tonight. And to me, that's the biggest egregious thing going. The second
John,
thing is,
I think that's a fair comment, and I don't disagree with you. I think that that is a problematic portion of the property, and I think you're right to raise the point. And
second, if I may just finish my thought, the second point is I think the town, and I think you say the document says what it says. Well, it doesn't say I have to build a pocket park, does it? But I did. And that gives people more enjoyment and enjoying the property completely unobstructed from anything other than the original trees that were there from whenever, from 1900 maybe, or, prior. And that wasn't required, but I did that as a gift to the town. So having a little bit of privacy in exchange for all the things I've done, I think is, I don't see why that couldn't be justified. And it was agreed to by the prior people. Maybe it was loosey-goosey and all that. I'm kind of a man of my word, I shake somebody's hand. I really don't care what the paperwork says. I'm more interested in what, looking somebody in the eye and saying, this is what we're going to do, So that's kind of, I'm from the old school, Kevin. I'm sorry, but that's kind of how I've always operated. But I did that as a gift to the town at no cost to the town. It was a great cost to me, and I enjoyed doing it. And I'm willing to help with the street signs or whatever, the program with all that, the interpretation of the property. And I told you, it is my discretion on who comes on the property and who doesn't. I mean, obviously, I'm trying to make it so it's a cultural asset to the town, and all that. But I can't give up my privacy, and that's what the argument is. A friendly argument, but an argument nonetheless. And I respect your position. You're looking at 4 corners of the agreement. Well, I don't think you can look at 4 corners of the agreement on something like this project. It just isn't that cut and dry. It just isn't. And you know, I understand that you weren't there and weren't part of that, you know, and I respect that. And I understand you're trying to do and follow the rules, and I respect that too. But from where I sit, I think I've done above and beyond what was required by the agreement by, you know, exponential effort. And I think the town got a very good deal out of it. And you know, I think everybody's happy. I think if you polled people, other than people that, you know, perhaps would say something to the effect, well, I could have done that. Why did we give, you know, some wealthy guy $1 million or whatever, you know, they say, you know, some of these people that don't understand anything, don't understand this project whatsoever. But other than those people, which are in the very, you know, shrinking minority, most people would love it. I mean, you know, during that last weekend or whatever it was when you had the walk that everybody does during Thanksgiving, I was out there working on my yard and on a couple of things. Some of the lights blew on my Christmas lights, and I was trying to figure it out. And they all it was accolade after accolade. You know, everybody loved the park and everything else. I mean, you know, nobody's bitching about some trees along Parkerville. About Deerfoot, they give me some privacy. I mean, I don't think there's a house more on display in this whole town than that house is.
No.
I mean, it's a flash cube in the middle of, you know, I mean, thank God it's set back off the street because you couldn't live there otherwise. You know, I mean, honestly, you know, it'd be too public. My wife and I are very private people. You know, we kind of live to us. You know, we don't really, you know, make any noise. I mean, you know, I was heavily involved in working on that property across the street on Sears Road that was just restored as well. That was going to turn into a complete mess, and I got in the middle of that and got that to turn in the right direction. And you know, so I mean, you got to look at the whole thing in its totality. You know, that's what you got to look at. Yeah, if you want to, we just can't be boxed on one issue and then do all this other stuff and get no credit for it. You know, it's just you have to understand this is a living, breathing thing, and you have to look at the overall totality of the project. And I think if you polled the people in town, you'd find that their expectations were exceeded on this project. And I think that's a good result for everybody.
Annie, you had your hand up. Did you
I had my hand up, but I think it was answered. My question was whether you know, the prior agreement that you know, when you had reviewed the landscaping plans with the prior commission, you know, and they approved those trees there. My question was whether or not that was like in writing, like if we were to go back or not in writing, well, yes, in writing, or if it was voted on by the commission, like if we were to go back and, you know, read minutes, would it be addressed there? Or was it really just kind of a conversational thing? And I think my question was answered that it wasn't really official, but it was, you know, a handshake understanding.
Well, if you look,
no, wait, let me answer that. That's
well, let me
not
just say one
correct.
thing. Hold on, Michael. If you look at that pictures that Al Bezanson took, you know, he kind of took all pictures all the way through the whole restoration process. You'll actually see a picture, believe it or not, of your former chairman, Joe Hubley, out there with me, going over trees and supervising the trees. And that's when, you know, so, you know, this visual documentation of your commission being on site when all these trees were being planted and everything else. So, I mean, I don't know what a picture's worth 1,000 words, right, Annie? So that's there. I don't know where it is, but it's in the chronological thing somewhere. And because I was just looking at it the other day on the Facebook page. Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we voted to accept the landscape plan, but you know, you have also got to remember that until fairly recently, you know, until COVID, frankly, you know, we would get minutes. No one cared what the historical commission did because no one cared about us and no one supported us. We met not online. The minutes we would get were, I don't know, 4 months back. You know, it was a much more informal time in terms of what these arrangements are. And so I apologize for the use of my word sledge. That was probably a little hard. But what I'm urging you to do is not try to go back and renegotiate what was already sort of settled law. And as someone who wrote that agreement, as I will continually say, I know what the intentions were. And I'm telling you, as a landscape professional, that does not violate the spirit of this agreement. And I was there and helped approve these as a board member. And as the landscape person, I was actually designated the coordinator of this to be there. And by the way, I will just tell everyone here, I think you probably know this already, I'm here in an entirely volunteer capacity. I'm not working for John. And I have not been working for John in terms of with the Conservation Commission either. I stepped in because I realized that when we wrote these agreements, we left a few things a little too vaguely. And in terms of conservation, we didn't pay any attention to them at all. This agreement was entirely done with historical, with the presumption that conservation really would have nothing much to say about it, which was crazy. So John got left in some unfortunate circumstances with some of this stuff, which I volunteered to like help him out with, because this is the most important structure in our town, frankly, other than the townhouse, certainly the most historic. And again, I realize that we have $997,000 in this, but it's fractional in terms of what we bought for the $997,000 was not a say in per se the construction, but essentially the commitment not to subdivide the lot. It was a subdivision restriction so that the house wouldn't be torn down and the lot subdivided. So I would just urge you, and I'm going to stop here, that that we do look, as John say, at the holistic big picture here, and focus less on this business of these trees, which we did approve back in the day. And I don't think we can say, the town, can say much anything about it now. I mean, going forward, are there pruning solutions? Potentially. Are there, other aspects? Potentially. But I think you're a long way off that, frankly, right at the moment. So I just would urge a holistic consensus on this.
So Michael, I'll agree with you. So my question, gets to, if the historical commission, which didn't include any person, that's currently on the commission now, if it was approved by the historical commission at that time, then I'm of the mindset that we can't really go back and say, oh, well, we don't agree with what that commission approved. So, I'm personally inclined to say, if it was approved at one point, then we need to accept that approval, even if it was from different people. So that's kind of where I am, and so thank you for answering my question.
Well, and thank you, Annie. I mean, the opinions of commissions change over course of time and leadership and membership, obviously. But Kevin's right. The agreement is the agreement. But I think in terms of this particular issue, I don't think this is in violation of this. And we did say at the time that this was going to be okay, because it's 130 feet out of thousands. Personally, I would not necessarily want to live in a house that only has 130 feet of protection on a 1,000-foot perimeter where I'm visible from all four sides. But, there you go. So
on Main Street.
Yeah, well, anyway, so again, I'm happy to be whatever resource I can be to you to try to put together the somewhat patchy historical record, which is kind of ironic considering we were the historical commission. But again, we could barely get a quorum. So
I don't see, Michael, I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't see the relevancy of much of this. I just don't see the relevancy. We've got a document, we have a legal agreement. We have a responsibility as a commission to track it and to follow it and to, if necessary, enforce it. I think there's a point where advocacy becomes argumentative, and I don't see where this is going. what I'm trying to say, I think what the commission has been trying to say, is that we are wildly in support of what has been done at 84 Main. We are wildly in support of Mr. Della Priscoli's efforts, and very grateful for them. All that I've tried to say is that I have some concern as plants mature, as things move forward, as plants that were put in at 6 feet tall grow over time to 60 feet, and what the impact is going to be. I'm not prepared to call for a vote at this time on any element of this. I'm simply trying to open up a productive conversation that addresses the fact that the preservation restriction, a legal document that's binding on all parties, makes it very clear that pruning and maintenance will be required to maintain the viewscapes to the buildings of historical significance from Parkerville Road, Deerfoot Road, and Main Street, full stop, end of story. And we can debate the fine details of that going forward, but I don't think anybody can accept that a verbal agreement with Joe Hubley at some time supersedes the legal document that we have in front of us. And I don't want to sound argumentative myself about it, but I think it's fairly clear. And all I'm trying to encourage you and John to think about is that, again, a beautiful effort has gone into this building, and we have an interest as a historical commission to make sure that that beautiful effort is framed and available and visible, with allowances made for the inhabitants' right of privacy and peaceful enjoyment of their property, with those allowances made that this magnificent building remain accessible and visible, because that's what we paid for. Unfortunately, we didn't just pay to prevent the property from being subdivided. If that were the extent of the agreement wouldn't run to 102 pages. It runs to 102 pages because it enumerates quite clearly and carefully the rights and obligations of each side. And so I'm trying to avoid, in fact, any kind of contentious conversation by saying we love what John has done. We're grateful for where he's gone above and beyond, as in the little pocket park at the corner of Deerfoot and Main. However, we have a responsibility to see to it going forward that a productive conversation ensues to make sure that we can be able to view the buildings, and that's the end of it. And I don't want to get into the 130 feet of arborvitae that are today 15 or 20 feet tall, and in a decade from now might be 40 feet tall. But I am telling you that some future iteration of the Historical Commission, or some future chair, or maybe it's still me, who knows, is likely going to come and say, do you really need 130 feet at 50 feet tall to keep the headlights out of the dining room? And I just want to leave it at that. I think we've, I don't want to exhaust anybody's patience on this, but let's just be real about it, and let's try to be friends. We all are here. And so, but let's go forward in a spirit of open-minded conversation. And again, my appeal to John and Michael is that I love this building. I think everything that's been done has been brilliant and fabulous. I just want to make sure that we talk about that we do have concerns about being able to see it as the landscape matures. That's all. If you guys were to say to us, hey, look, we like those arborvitae right where they are, but I'll make a commitment to keep them at 15 feet tall, that would go a long way, because you could stand there on a Deerfoot and see the vista of the building over the top. And I agree that as you move around the property, You get different aspects of the vista, some quite obscured, some quite clear. You stand at the front gate, you could see straight, you know, you've got that alley of trees, those are going to mature, things are going to change. But let's be honest with each other and have a full-throated dialogue going forward about how we can work as partners. I'll say one last thing on this. The preservation restriction calls on page 21 that any historical markers that are put up should be done with the collaboration and the approval of the commission. Now, the sign down by that park at the corner of Main and Deerfoot is a lovely sign. I quite enjoy it. I think it's quite handsome. I think it's quite well placed. I will observe that it notes that the grounds were designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and both Frederick and Olmsted are misspelled on the sign. Now, I'm an English teacher by trade, but you know what? I make typos and mistakes all the time. When I find them in my agenda, I'm always appalled, right? Everybody makes mistakes. But I'm willing to say that had that signage, which apparently was not, had it been brought forward to the commission as was required in the document, I venture to say that the smart people that we have on this group and 6 or 10 or 12, eyes, 5 or 6 or 7 sets of eyes would have caught those typos. So, it's not in the spirit of nitpickiness. It's in the spirit of we can work together as partners to make sure that not only are the residents of Southborough satisfied that they're continuing to get what they paid for, but that we can help. We can provide some eyes and ears and hopefully thoughtfulness that's not obtrusive and not impinging on John's rights whatsoever, but that we can do this as friends and partners. And so, that historical marker, under the terms of the agreement, it should have been brought to us. It was not. And there are mistakes on it, mistakes, again, that I think we might have caught, even though I make mistakes all the time.
Well,
We're only human,
to
right?
answer your question there, Michael already pointed out to me that they're misspelled, and I had agreed at some point that I'm going to get it fixed. So I'll take it back
Right,
to
well,
the sign
thank you.
maker.
And so, it's a small thing.
Yeah,
But
no,
again,
it bugs me too that the sign guy didn't pick it up and all that. So but it's an easy fix.
right. All I'm pointing out by that small anecdote is that there is power in cooperation, and I think there are good things to be had by us working as partners. We can bring the school children of Southborough into the property and do some education. We can help with comments that may offer some perspective about how the landscape is viewed by people passing by as stunningly beautiful, but as a small concern about the Deerfoot side. Take it under advisement. I'm not asking for a decision tonight, and I'm not asking my membership to make a decision about it. But
Kevin,
Grant has raised it, and let's all think about it, and let's go home.
But basically, after this discussion, now you've made a point of it. So forgive me for saying this, but I am gonna, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but I'm gonna ask for a vote at some point in the not too distant future, because I don't want to deal with another board why all the people with any kind of memory of this thing are gone, and have somebody come back, even if I wasn't here, and give my family a hard time down the road by some document that really has been superseded. So I need to clean up the record. So we're going to have, unfortunately, now that you've raised it, it was going to have to be formally addressed at some point.
I think that's fair, John. I think that's fair. And I think actually it would be beneficial both to you, so you don't have to deal with it in the future, and for the commission, that if there is any disagreement or lack of clarity or modification, I would be in favor of formalizing it, because I don't want to really be going through this either. Frankly, I find it quite tedious, and I'm sure you do as well. So, and let's take it under advisement. Let us reconvene sometime in the future and see if we can, effect a satisfactory solution. I would like my members some time to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into a, into a battle about it, but it especially when I've worked hard and I feel, and I think most people feel I've gone above and beyond. I mean, maybe not necessarily the commission, but I think the public at large, and that's who paid for this, along with you folks, obviously. So I'm not looking for that, but.
Well, and again, I think, I think we agree that you've gone above and beyond.
And I'm not looking for trouble, Kevin,
Well, and neither are we. And so I think this is a good place to, unless anybody on the commission or Michael has another comment.
No, it's what I suggested earlier. I think you should just ratify what we had already agreed to, whether it was verbally or in the record. I mean, if you look, you probably will find that adoption of the landscape plan. So, if I just to put this to bed, I think can be some language that could redefine that or clarify the whole thing so that this doesn't come up again in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, as John has said. So I'm totally.
I've looked very carefully at the landscape plan. I must tell you, and can bring it up on screen if you like, and there is no document that I've seen that shows 130 feet of arborvitae. I just leave it at that. It's simply not shown on the plans.
We walked around, Kevin, with a plan and marked up things and with pencil. I don't know what happened to all those plans, but
I think
that's what happened. I mean, just so you know.
Well, I will say that any agreement I make on something as important as a legal document that was signed by you, the select board, the former SHC chair, and the director of the Mass Historical Commission, any amendments that I engage in on a document like that are going to be memorialized by town council and your council, because I just don't think you can operate with all respect to the idea of a man's honor is his word and his word is honor. I think because personnel changes, this stuff has to get memorialized.
Well, that's exactly why I would want to get a statement or an affidavit out of Rooney, out of Semino, and out of Hubley, as well as Michael, about what really took place here. Because if this thing ever ended up sideways, that's what's going to be the testimony, right. And it's going to be hard pressed, I think, to overcome that on your end. So I think we should figure out a mutual way to do this now and memorialize it.
Well,
why the people are still here.
It would be helpful to have whatever agreement was reached documented, and not to be persnickety about it, but simply to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and protected. I think really, as Michael said, things were, you may interpret them as loosey-goosey at the time. You got a result better than you had hoped for. I think you even said that, or somebody did tonight. And that's really the bottom line. All right. So, when you look at something, you got to look at it in its totality. You know what I mean? That's the practical way to look at something. And other than that, you're not going to get the result that you're looking for. You want to exceed the result, and I think that's what happened here. And I just remember again that this is not. I don't get paid extra for this. I don't get paid at all.
I understand
that I'm here trying to do what I think is the right job in the right way, or it's not worth me doing it all.
And I think you're doing a good job, and I think everybody on this board. I know what it takes to be on these boards. I've been in front of boards since 1979 in my business. So I've been in front of thousands of boards, over the years, if you add all, because I'm a developer, that's what I do. So that requires conservation, historical, sometimes planning boards, zoning boards, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand that's all volunteer and it's a passion. You're trying to do what's right for society. I respect that totally, believe me. And you know, I actually have a bigger respect for that than most people because I know what it takes and how much time it chews up on your personal lives. So, you know, I think it's a very noble effort that you're doing, and I really admire people, even if I disagree with them. That
Well,
you know that I know what you're doing is not some kind of self motivation. It's for the good of society, and I respect that. Just so you know where I'm coming from, I know that, and you know when I did this project, you know, I wanted to exceed all expectations. It means a lot to me to do that, and I feel I have, and I think that has to weigh on this board's arbitration of this whole thing, is to look at the totality of it, not zeroing in on any one item, and looking at the totality. If the totality exceeds what you thought you were going to get, then I think we should just call it. But that's
well,
my opinion.
I'm very appreciative of both of you coming. You know, we're all friends, and we've got other items tonight, in fact, on our agenda that pertain to the historical society, and all the great work that Michael is doing. And so I'm already grossly over time with our
I understand.
next guest, and so I think this is probably a good place to sort of end our conversation for
Okay.
tonight. I mean, let's be in touch, and you know, let's work together. And this is all said with great appreciation for you both. And
Well,
thank
I have
you so
nothing.
much.
I'm just here as witness. I have nothing to do with this. It's all John. This was his thing, and he moved it forward. So, you know, to
Oh,
whatever
I know, but
degree
it's been
I can,
very helpful, Michael.
to whatever degree I can facilitate this and get these issues put to bed, like the issues that we successfully negotiated with conservation. I think that's great. So let's talk, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
All
Thanks.
right, thank you
Thank
both.
you.
All right,
Thank you.
bye.
Thanks so much.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night. Okay.
Yes,
hang on a
I'm gonna
second.
jump off too. I actually have another meeting. I just wanted to stay for that agenda item. So enjoy the rest of your meeting, and I will catch up with the recording later.
Thanks,
Okay,
Annie.
Thank you, Annie.
and now I am going to, and boy, oh boy, do I owe a large
Gratitude.
gratitude. Well, I thank both Michael and John for coming along, and I'm promoting Jim Haggerty, who has the patience of an absolute saint, because I told him that I didn't think, you know, our conversation with Mr. Della Priscoli was going to be quite that long. I did warn him it might be a while. But we are now on finally to our fourth item on the agenda, which is a discussion with Mr. Jim Haggerty, who is the town clerk, with regard to the clerk's Community Preservation Act application for 2024 annual town meeting. And this is an application titled Preservation, Restoration, Digitization of Permanent Town Records. And I did send this out in the packet. It was also posted with our public agenda. But Jim is here. Thank you, Jim. And I'm trying to move my participant box so that I can see you. There we go. Okay. Thank you so much for your patience. Are you in your office?
I am, yes.
Oh my God. Now I really feel bad. I was hoping you might be at home, stretched out on your couch.
Trust me, I'll be here long after your meeting. I got a lot of catching up to do.
Well, thank you. And you know, everyone's had a chance to read this, I hope. But if you could just sort of, you know, quickly walk us through. I don't think there's any hedge trimming involved in your proposal, but just sort of lay out for us what you're looking for. And I will say to the group, and like Kelly and hasn't seen any of this stuff, CPC proposals, applications for CPA funding that go through CPC that concern matters historical, Kelly, ultimately have to come to historical and you know, seek our approval or endorsement before CPC actually acts on it. Now, Grant is our rep on CPC, And I don't know, Grant, is there anything else we need to tee this up before we have Jim?
No, I don't think so. I think, again, this is my first time through the process. I think my understanding is that there's some sort of formal language that CPC requires in the vote. So we might have to formalize it with that kind of language in the future. But I think that's the only follow-up I'd have. Also, Jim, welcome. He has not presented before CPC yet. I think our next meeting is on December 6th. So I just want to note that I haven't reviewed his application prior to this meeting. Oh, I did for this meeting, but not as part of the CPC process.
Got it. Jim, the floor is yours.
Okay. We have a lot of majority of the town's historic records in the custody of the clerk. And over the past, going back before my time, some of those were set out to be preserved. And frankly, when it was done before my time, they sent it to a company that sort of like used the Staples Easy button. Everything was preserved the same way, whether it needed to be or not. And for some reason that I don't quite understand, when they sent those records to the vendor, they had a microfilm copy made because that's how things were done. Yet at the time, they didn't scan the documents. I cannot explain that. It's one of those go figure things. But in any case, we were very fortunate to stumble across a young fellow by the name of, first name of Jeremy, who was a graduate student in archival management. And almost when he got his foot off the plane in Boston when he came here for grad school, I grabbed him. And we were able to bring him in here. And with the assistance of the CPC a couple of years ago, we had some money left over from a prior CPC article for scanning documents. And I presented to them and said, you know, instead of all sending these documents out for one company just to treat everything exactly the same, not everything needs to be preserved the same. I said, we can accomplish what we wanted to accomplish by doing some of this inside. Some documents need a lot of treatment, some need none. And they allowed us to take that and use some of the money to pay Jeremy and working part-time for us. So to give an example of what he's done, if you could open a second window in your machine, if you were to go to a website called 01772history.org, right, you'll see one of the things that Jeremy is doing for us. What we've been able to do, the goal of our objective is to be able to take all of the historical records that we have here and have them scanned and presented to the public via the website, but not just to put, 40,000 pictures up there, but to tell a story and it makes sense that people can actually follow the trail. And that's essentially what Jeremy's done for us, or part of what's done for us. We have a lot of work to finish up here though. But some of the records we've come across are really cool. We have an original document here signed by both John Hancock and Sam Adams, which is really cool. And it's in great physical shape. Ironically, it involves just after Southborough split away from Marlborough. And by the way, I don't know if you folks know, some of you folks might know this story. Do you know why Southborough split from Marlborough? The language in the document is essentially, we have the original document. And it says that it was too arduous a journey for the women folk and wee ones, because it's mandatory for people to go to church on Sunday. And it was too long a drive to go to church on Sunday. And that's literally why the town split. And when the Marlborough town father said, okay, they said, as long as you build a church and have a suitable minister, because at the time the church was the center of town government before we had a government. But anyway, once Southborough actually became a town and we split away from England, Hancock was the president and John Adams Hancock was the governor and Adams was the Speaker of the Senate, and the President of the Senate, I should say. And a Southborough resident complained that he was being double taxed by Marlborough and Southborough. So we have this original document signed by the two of them saying, yeah, you're right, give him his money back. But of course, we didn't have a US currency back then. So it orders the money to be paid in British pounds, sterling, and pfennigs, which is really cool. And so there's a lot of really, really neat things like that we have. So what we're looking to do here primarily with the CPC funds is to pay Jeremy to work part-time to complete this project, to be able to get all these things in a logical format. He's still going through preserving these, finding what items have the mites in them, what need preservation, what don't. But our objective is to have all this available for the public before we have the celebration in 2027. And we've been able to do some of this with CPC money. Some of this we've been able to do for free through the library, through the Mass Library Organization. And we want to have a way for people to research this, not just say we have 60 boxes or 200 boxes worth of stuff. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. It's a really neat thing. And I don't know if any other town in Massachusetts has been able to pull this off. And we're lucky just to stumble across this young fellow, Jeremy, who just, he's someone you're going to read about someday. He's just a brilliant, brilliant person. And in addition to the CPC, so the CPC is primarily to pay for an archivist, part-time archivist, and the CPC has done this previously, not for us, but for the Historical Historical Commission, sorry, in the past. But not to confuse issues. So this is primarily the money we're looking for this year. It's mostly to pay the part-time salary of the archivist. But in addition, there's $14,665 for documents to be physically preserved and scanned by the New England Document Conservation Center up in Andover. So that's where we get to the total of $49,648. So let me just throw something out to confuse issues just a little bit. I initially asked CPC for more money because we have a little over 10,000 pages of documents that need to be scanned. And we've done a lot of the scanning ourselves inside with the help of seniors working tax write-off and things like that. But the remaining is 10,000 plus documents that we need to get scanned that are not part of this proposal right here. They're of a unique physical condition or size, they're bound or whatever the condition is, they can't go on a typical scanner. They have to go on a scanner that's basically like a scale. One side goes up, one goes down, very specialized. And we can't do that in-house. The wrinkle is the documents themselves physically either have already been preserved or they don't need to be preserved. And because we're not physically preserving the document, there's a ruling from the Department of Revenue that indicates that we can't spend CPC monies on that. So I just want to throw that out there that independent of this, there's a separate piece of this. And I've asked the select board if there's any extra ARPA money available, if they would fund it through ARPA. If not, I'm going to put it in some of it in my budget for 2025, some for 2026. So it's not within the scope of what we're talking about tonight, but I just wanted to throw it out to you that there's a separate piece of this that's out there. It's all all our documents. And when we get all done with this, we want to take, as part of next year's project, we want to take probably the top 20 or 25 most significant documents we have and have them printed up on some pretty thick stock paper and present those to the local schools for them to show these kids what it is. I go to the schools a couple times a year and the kids always flip out when I show them a book with handwritten notes from 1727. And they don't understand the concept that there weren't not even typewriters and computers back then. So it's pretty cool for kids to figure out what cursive is and try to stumble through it. So in a nutshell, that's what we're looking to do.
Thank you, Jim. And I will say that I personally think this is a tremendously worthwhile project. And I was fortunate enough, Jim was nice enough to give me a tour. It's right over his left shoulder there. He's got that safe in his office that it's a kind of a shallow thing that has a whole bunch of documents in it. But the vast majority of the documents that we're talking about are in the basement of the townhouse, right below Jim's feet, basically. And let me tell you, if you haven't been in the basement of the townhouse, it's a challenging area. Damp, low ceilinged, people of Jim and my height have to hunch over the whole time. You're the risk of knocking your head into a steel beam. Like I said, very wet, humidifiers galore running down there, and evidence on the rusted file cabinets of past floods. And these are documents that are really tell the whole story of Southborough, and they are at risk. And so this is a project that I just think we're lucky to still have what we have. And I think what the effort that Jim and the clerk's office are engaged in is really designed to make sure this stuff is around in perpetuity in some form. And so, but I want to turn it over to see if you folks have any questions. Jim Blaschke, anything?
No, I looked through the document. It seemed like it had been well thought out in terms of the costing, and it covered at least 2 years. If that's what it's going to take, Jim, then I think it's a great idea. I support it.
Thank you.
Great. Grant?
Thanks, Jim. Great presentation. I just had a follow-up question on what you had said about the request being revised downward. So is the number in the document of 89,000 with 49,000 and 39,000 in FY25 and 39 in FY26, is that the current figure, or had that been reduced?
No, that is the current figure, but in addition to that, there's $59,000 in change that I'm trying to get through ARPA funds.
Okay, gotcha. And then one other question I had was, you'd referenced that there had been previous funding for this kind of work previously. Would this be exactly the same, essentially that kind of work, it's just a continuation of it, or is this a different type of documents that you'd be scanning? Like what, maybe some more detail on like what the documents are, if we know them, that you'd be looking to, or maybe even how old they are, or I don't know if you have that kind of detail, but that could be useful as well.
Well, the majority, probably 2/3 of the money that we're looking for here is actually to pay for the archivist to review and deal with these documents, rather than to, in prior iterations going back, I think 11 years ago, they just took all the boxes and sent them out to a vendor, and they just came back and they put them back on a shelf. That's what happened. This is to take documents, including some of those that have been preserved, with literally having every page of every document reviewed. I mean, that's what's involved here.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, the things that fall out. I don't have the mental capacity to do what this fellow does. I just don't. Okay, and nor the time to do it. But it's amazing the things that have come out. We come across an odd thing here where a lady asked us, I guess 30, 40 years ago, to record a birth after it had happened. And the town did not have a copy of her birth certificate. And we found that the original document from 1945, evidently when they did this 40 some odd years ago, they gave the lady the wrong date of birth. So now she's operating with Social Security, a passport, on the wrong date of birth. I'm scratching my head saying, you know, what do we do for this? She's a lady in her 70s. But no, that's literally what it's come down to. And it's a really cool thing to go look at that website and to see that we're trying to put this entire mosaic together for people to see. And not just, here's a picture of a document, here's what it means, and here's how it fits into the puzzle. Whereas, like I say, the money, when they did this years and years ago, I mean, Grant, I don't know if you've ever had the misfortune doing research in school to have to use a microfilm machine. All right.
I have.
Okay. Well, one of the first things that caused me to scratch the bald head I have here is when I found these rolls of microfilm. And I said, why do we do this? Oh, well, that's how documents are retained. I said, all right, well, who's tested these? How do we know they were done properly? Who has a microfilm reader? And I called the vendor and said, oh, you can come up here anytime you want to use it. I said, that's not how microfilm readers work. So I brought an old fingerprint loop that I used in my old job and flashlight and sampled some of these and looked at them. And I noticed they didn't have what's called a splib. Well, a splib is the little button you press when you're reviewing microfilm. Press it once, it goes to the, you know, and next page. They didn't put splibs on these things. And I said, why not? And they said, well, nobody asked for it. I said, isn't that like buying a car and not getting lug nuts on the tires? Is there?
Oh, I think.
Jim, your audio is dropped off.
Oh, is that it?
I think you're back.
Yep.
Okay, good. But anyway, like I said, there was no extra cost for the splibs. They just didn't do it because everybody just got vanilla. It's like having 27 flavors of ice cream that are all vanilla. And towns all throughout Massachusetts every year spend thousands of dollars on this stuff to have things quote unquote preserved, and they just put it in a box, which is lunacy. So really what we're trying to do is create value for the information so that people can see this from home and understand what it means. So that's the big difference, what we do now versus what had happened in the past.
Thank you. No, I think it's a great idea. And just my last question, not strictly relevant, but are the documents safe in the basement currently? Like I know I had heard that there was floods previously and that some were damaged. Like, do they need to? That's a whole other conversation. But like, should they not be in the basement right now?
Well, Well, as soon as we get the money, they're going up to the vendor and they won't go back down there.
Okay.
But as Kevin saw when he came down there, I've installed my own shelving down there. So all of our stuff is, you can tell where our stuff is versus everybody else's. Unless Noah's Ark has a problem down there, we're not going to have a flood issue. But I know that past 10, 12 years ago, there was significant flooding down there, and Brian Ballantyne and Paul Sibeli from the assessor's office went through, and they had to throw out a lot of records just across the whole spectrum of the town because of mold, and they couldn't be preserved. So I don't know what we've lost in history there, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah, once we're all said and done, nothing's going back down that basement. Unless they build an appropriate facility down there, and I don't know how likely it is.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle,
So we're all on this commission because we really want to preserve history. And one thing that I've learned as being a member of this committee is that documentation is so important. And what I'm referring to is the OBG and Sally Waters, and just how some things are just lost, and you can't replace them. Even tonight's lesson with the Burnett Mansion, I mean, things were not documented. So I feel that this is a worthwhile cause, and it's something that we should not even question whether or not it needs to be done.
Thank you.
Kelly.
Hi, Jim.
Okay.
After you've explained everything that's down there, I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see it all. So, yeah, that got me excited because I like to do research and stuff like that. So can't wait to get that up.
Kelly, I think Kelly will be a user of 0101772.org. It's really quite, I spent some time on the site and it really is quite interesting. Jim, I just have one last question before we bring this to a vote. And I know the vote is asked for two separate votes. One is that the documents are significant to the history of Southborough. That'll be yay or nay. And then secondly, whether or not we support the application. So that's the two votes we have to take. My one question, Jim, is what does out of this, 89, 152, what does one pay an archivist these days?
Great question. So this year it would be 30, for next year it would be $34.50 an hour, which I've done some research, which is the going rate for a first-year archivist with no benefits at a part-time rate. This just is back to a question you asked about historical. Every document that we're talking about here is more than 50 years old, so that fits within the historical stuff. When I look at my list here, for example, I have something here of records relating to a voter and jury list from 1771 to 1947. Records of meetings 1902 to 1914. Mortgage releases 1897 to 1707. Assessors records 1880 to 1900. Taxpayer list 1771 to 1887. So these are burial records 1794 to 1862. So these are all of this is old stuff. Hey, Michelle, just to jump back to something you mentioned about the meeting here tonight. One of the things I knew when I was on the rec commission and on advisory, when you tried to look back at old meeting minutes, good luck to you, the Red Sox trying to find them. It didn't happen. So I actually brought a bylaw when I became the clerk to make us responsible for storing all the minutes and the documents used at all the meetings. So they're all available online, and we're a real nudge to people that don't submit them to get them in. So that, yeah, you can go back and look now from 2016. Everything is right here, so people can see it all online. It's a little bit of effort, but it's the right thing to do to preserve that so people can research and participate in it. So we're in pretty good shape. But these are all old. There's some really cool things here to look at. One of the things that really got my attention is when I looked at some of the old death certificates, even 100 years ago, it's amazing to see the cause of death, the things that we just take for granted today. People dying of a broken leg, people dying because they stepped on a nail, got a nail in the foot, tetanus. There's so many simple things that it's just stunning how fragile life was for people, in the not too distant past.
Well, that tees it up perfectly to, if we want to move this right to the first vote we would have to take, we need a motion that the documents in question that Jim has just discussed are significant to the history of Southborough.
So moved.
Is there a second on that?
I second.
Okay, so I heard the motion from Jim and a second from Michelle. I'll take a roll call vote. Again, this is the vote that the documents in question are significant to the history of Southborough. Jim,
Aye.
Grant,
Aye.
Michelle,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Miller is aye, so it's 5-0 that they are significant. The second question is whether or not the Historical Commission supports this application. So we need a motion on that.
Moved.
Jim has made it. And a second.
I second it.
Okay, seconded by Michelle. We'll go right to a roll call vote. Whether, again, this is whether or not you support the application for preservation, restoration, digitization of permanent town records. Jim.
Aye.
Grant.
From this one, I'm going to abstain just because I have not heard it, had the meeting with the CPC to get some of those extra details. So I don't want to participate in this vote and potentially vote a different way when it comes before us that way. So I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Okay, Michelle,
Yes.
Kelly,
Aye.
Miller is aye. So 4-0-1 on that one. And so we support Jim
Thank you.
as a commission. And thank you so much for your infinite patience. Thank you for the tour, which gave me a lot of perspective. I hope I could pass on a little bit to the commission. And I look forward to seeing CPC act affirmatively on this proposal. I think it's absolutely vital.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Have a
Thank
night,
you.
folks.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good one.
Thank you, Jim.
And good night. Moving on, I will going to try to really speed this up because this has been pretty long so far. So in terms of chair's report, there's a number of things that it's really actually very important that I get clear and bring everybody up to speed on, because we have to act on a number of these items. With regard to the Southborough Center Historic District signage, of course, this is our ARPA thing, our beautiful bronze signs, the 7 entry points to the district. And it's been a long haul. I've had multiple meetings with Bill Cundiff, one with Chris Leroy, discussing location, placement, installation issues, and so on. On November 8th, Annie and I went out, and Bill and I and Chris had agreed that we could get all six of the 7 installed. The 7th one, which is going to go right adjacent to the new park, the so-called St. Mark's Street Park, that area, hopefully to be called Heritage Park on our recommendation. Since one will go there, we want to defer that one because we don't want construction to damage the sign. So that's been deferred. The other 6, we want to get up, and we want to get up before the ground freezes because they've been sitting at DPW since June. And on November 8th, Annie and I went out to the 6 locations, and we staked 5 of them after consultation with Bill Cundiff. The 6th one is actually, this is the one at 1 Main Street, which is right as you cross the railroad tracks going westbound on Main. The building that's right there is the Knights of Columbus. And that was a tricky location because if you're familiar with that area, this is like across the street from Moro's, the spa, right? The sidewalk there is very wide. And Bill indicated that sign would actually be on private property, the property of the KFC building. And so we needed sort of special permission because it wasn't in the public right of way, which is where all the other signs will be. So in the case of a public right of way, we did consult with all the abutters. but on the public right of way, they can just come stick it up there anyway. They don't really need your say so kind of thing. But with the KFC, we did. So I actually went to a meeting of the Knights of Columbus on the 14th of November. At the very kind welcome from the entire group of guys there, but most especially Joe Cruciani, who's the Grand Knight of the chapter or the council. This is the Phil Sheridan Council 119, for what it's worth, of the KFC in Southborough. And they were very gracious to me and heard my pitch and what we wanted to do. And I explained where we want to put the sign. And they were quite receptive and quite kind and quite supportive, and they signed off on it. And what Bill Cundiff needed was basically a document signed that allowed DPW to enter their property for purposes of placing the sign. And so it required the signature of Craig Picarts, who's the president of the Phil Sheridan Building Association. That's a kind of legal entity that owns the KFC hall. So anyway, they were great, really nice folks, and they signed off. And so a day or two later, I went down with one more stake and put it in the ground where we all agreed on it. So that was quite a lot of stuff. And then, so the bottom line on this is that every place is staked except the one at the park. It's all ready to go. We've got a plan for it getting done, and it's just waiting on DPW, hopefully before the ground freezes like a brick, to be able to get out there and put them in. And I've asked, for them to let me know when this is going to happen, because we'd like to get a little PR out of it, in the sense of letting people know that these long-awaited ARPA-funded signage is actually going in the ground. Now, as to the disposition of the remaining ARPA funds, we had $4,230 that we were under budget on this, thankfully. And I was holding back that money, concerned, because I had been having these conversations with Mr. Cundiff, our DPW superintendent, about whether any additional materials, mounting brackets, any kind of stuff was going to be needed. And finally, we came to the conclusion, no. And that was the day before I got an email from the folks at the townhouse saying, well, you got to tell us what you want to do with the rest of that money. And so there was no time to convene a meeting because they wanted an answer like the next day or something. So what my answer was I asked them to give us $1,000 of that to further fund the historic house signs program, which we're in the process of re-ramping up. I asked for $500 to place a sign on that granite, or not granite, it's a rubble stone water tower in the rural cemetery. And I had mentioned this in a previous call that Bill Cundiff again had contacted me asking about what I knew about that tower, because they want to re-roof it, to protect it, make it look better and all that stuff. And I gave him all the information I had. There's a nice entry in the Macris database on that water tower. Once it sort of parted the clouds for me, and I said, it turns out that a lot of people in town have no idea what that water tower is for, what it was for. And it was for irrigation in the rural cemetery. There was actually a tank in the upper story of that tower. There was a windmill in the rural cemetery that pumped water up to the top of that tower, and then they would just gravity feed irrigation in the summer to keep the shrubbery green. So it's a really, and that the tower was built incidentally in 1903. It's a fascinating story. We have all the documentation. And so I proposed $500 for a modest, probably bronze sign to be affixed to the building, possibly to the doors. It has a double set of wooden doors in the front, to explain to folks in Southborough what the hell that thing is. And finally, I suggested to signal our strong commitment to the project, that they devote the remaining $2,730 to the granite post and iron rail fencing around the town common. So I went to the select board meeting on October 24th and pitched this. That was a busy night for historical at the select board, and they agreed very graciously. The select board did, to give us $1,000 for the house sign program, the $500 for the water tower small project. And as to the granite post and iron rail fencing, the chair suggested, and he's quite right, that it's a much larger and more complex project to that, and that symbolic gesture really wasn't necessary. They got my message. And there's further news on that front, which I'll save for a little bit later. But so we kicked the other $2,730 back into the kitty, basically, for disbursement elsewhere. So I'm very, very happy about the result. And again, look forward to the signs going up quite shortly. As to, I have also noted here, working group for the rural cemetery water tower sign. And I realized after I wrote that down that I'm over muddling and over complicating the matter, because the fact of it is I can write this text in an hour or less when I get a chance, and I will bring it to you at the next meeting for your perusal and edits and perhaps, fingers crossed, approval. Second item, progress on Revolutionary War veterans research. You know, we tried to do this last time, and I think we kind of got into the weeds. It's a very complicated thing. There are a lot of names to go over. Sally did, as I said last time, I thought, absolutely terrific, terrific work. I'm so grateful to her. She continues to work on it. But, you know, we agreed that the idea was to have somebody sort of vet it, just standard peer review that you would engage in any kind of, this is essentially an academic pursuit, and to have somebody look it over and to chat with her on the handful of points where she had some question. And it was delayed a little bit because the Veterans Graves agent, whom she was trying to consult with, resigned his post. And so it kind of left a certain kind of void and stopped us a little bit. So what I'm proposing, and unfortunately, you know, the two people that had indicated an interest in further looking into this in the spirit of peer review were Grant and Dan. Grant, being very much tied up these days with this sort of plethora of CPC stuff, has graciously agreed to sort of step aside on this. And I'm going to try to, he's not here tonight because it turns out he's covering for somebody ill over at Fay. But I want to try to get Dan to agree to take the lead on this and to sit down with Sally. And Sally has already, you know, talked to her about this, and she's good with the idea. To have the two of them put their heads together and hack through it. Jim Hegarty, who was just here, you know, has cautioned me that you can't put together a working group because that requires then public meetings. So that it has to be a sort of one-on-one thing. So Dan strikes me as, you know, he's a very strong interest in this and a good choice given his background to sit down with Sally and work it out. And what I'm going to try to task Dan with doing is to sit with Sally over the next month, get it together, resolve those issues, and come back to us with a very streamlined product so that we can consider it, discuss it, and vote on it. And I have had inquiries from the gentleman at Massar, the Mass Sons of the American Revolution, saying, where are you with that research? So I do want to get back to him as quickly as possible. So that's where I'm at on that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Grant.
I know, I just said great.
Fingers crossed. I don't, you know, if Dan says no, I might have to dragoon you back into the fray, but we'll see. As to 21 Boston Road, this was a CPC thing that, you remember, we discussed a little bit last time. I was urged to sort of take it up on a preliminary basis. And then as arranged by CPC and Grant forwarded us the information, there was a site visit on November 4th that, as it turned out, involved Ben Smith, the chair of CPC, Freddie Gillespie, the CPC consultant. I went, Michelle came, it was there for like the first hour, right? It ended up being a rather long visit. And then Jimmy Falcone, the sort of owner of the property, owns Falcone's, the service station, the oil company, and the building at 21 Boston Road, and Mr. Falcone's engineer. So we toured the site. We couldn't, there wasn't any quorum issues because there weren't enough of us from either board there. But typically in a site visit, of course, you just can't talk about anything. But we toured the site. It was very interesting. The official proposal has not been forthcoming, so there's really nothing for us to do right now. I will say that it was very interesting and very informative. And one big takeaway for me was that Mr. Falcone, whom I had not met previously, is a lovely guy. Really nice person, former select board member and lifelong resident, and deeply committed and interested in Southborough history. It's somewhat of a difficult project because ultimately the proposal for this building would involve lowering it from a 2.5-story building into a 1.5-story building. I'm not, for the sake of time, wanting to get into the weeds on that. But it's a somewhat of a tricky matter. Michelle, I don't know if you want to add anything on that or.
Well, the one thing that I was quite surprised at is the disrepair of the building. I mean, it really has seen some fire and some animals, and I cannot imagine undertaking that task and the money that it will cost.
Yeah, it's a very hefty, expensive proposal, and it's got and I think maybe the proponent is considering the complexity of this, and so we don't even need to get into it, but I did want to let you know that on the commission's behalf, that site visit did take place. Another one of these, another CPC thing that is in the background but hasn't formally come forward, as I understand it yet, is Grant was involved in this one, was on a Friday, November 10th. He and I went to the public safety building into the sort of fire engine bays and had a look at the so-called Engine 25, which is an old fire department pumper truck that was, Grant, correct me if I'm wrong, was built in 1968?
64, 68, I think. Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah.
And was in service for several decades in Southborough, decommissioned, sold again, ended up on the Cape rotting out, and finally rebought by the Southborough, what's the name of the group, Grant?
The firefighter association.
Firefighters Association.
So not the town itself, but
right, not the town, but
yeah.
A private group. They're being allowed to store it apparently at the public safety building. They bought it for $1,000. This is another tricky and rather complicated project because it's rather beautiful, and who doesn't support a historic fire truck? And it is a Southborough an artifact. They tell us, we were hosted by several of the firefighters, actually, all lovely people, really nice, very welcoming and friendly. Our chief host was Nate Kendall, who's a firefighter paramedic for the SFD. Great guy. He gave us the whole history of the engine, of the vehicle. It's going to cost $100,000 to put it back on a road and $300,000 to fully restore. So this is an expensive project. I don't know what the status of that proposal is, but again, Grant and I now have some background on it.
Yeah, he had come before CPC, not with the proposal, but just kind of talking about it loosely and expressed his interest to submit an application for this cycle. But as of now, I haven't seen an application come in. So I'm not sure if maybe they're thinking about next year instead. There are a lot of requests this year. So I'm not sure what the current status is, but there was interest for using CPC funds.
Another difficult haul because it is quite expensive, and of course all these have to go in front of town meeting and get approved for them to actually pass through. So that's that one. The next item I have, this is quite interesting. I'm too bad that Michael isn't still around. I want to show you something very quickly that I think you will find interesting. Everybody seeing that?
Not yet. Oh, yes.
There it is. Did it come up?
Yes.
This is a sign. Michael sent me this photo. This is in the Flag School. This is a sign that a previous incarnation of the Historical Commission, as much as 20 years ago, got the money for and paid for and had this sign made. Now, this sign pertains to the granite abutments that are on Parkerville south of Route 9. Like if you imagine it would be sort of west southwest of the transfer station on Parkerville, in that area. And this is where the Boston and Worcester Street Railway crossed over Parkerville. And the granite bridge abutment, the track is gone, of course, but the granite bridge abutments are still there. Well, they have this wonderful sign that sort of tells the story of what, these damn things are, kind of thing, made up. And then Michael said to me, the previous DPW had just, they never got it up. They never installed it. It's been sitting there in the Flag School for 20 years. And I said, just you wait. We're going to get it up. We're going to get that thing installed by hook or crook. If I have to drill the holes myself, and I've already talked to, Mr. Cundiff about this. And he said, well, we're the tool that drives the nail, but you got to figure it out. And so we got to figure it out. And the question is, does anybody want to take this one on to figure out how to it's got mounting things in the back of the sign, has to go into the granite somehow. You follow? Like you would probably embed bolts in the granite, and then it sort of hangs like a picture, but obviously so that it doesn't get stolen. Somebody needs to look in how the DPW folks are very, they're can-do, go get them kind of people, but they want us to do
the engineering.
How it's going to actually get done. So somebody would need to try to figure this out.
I'm happy to discern a little bit if I can.
Jim, you did so well with the stainless screws for the house signs. I mean, I'm like, maybe
that's a qualification for granite abutments, but I'll go.
Well, but if you can, talk to Michael, maybe go down to the Flag School, take a look at this doggone thing and see what we need to do. Because I'll whatever needs to be done, we got to figure it out. But it's just a sin to have that thing sit there.
Is there a shortcut name for that sign?
I'll send you the picture.
Street.
Yeah, Michael knows all about it. He was real nice to sort of bring that forward, and so I said you got to stay around. Now the next thing, you're
Kevin,
Jim.
Do you mind if I? Sorry, I just on that topic. First of all, that's great news. And I think we had a previous conversation actually about whether or not the Historical Commission would be interested in putting, kind of in these public assets about putting signs up. And I think I had actually mentioned that the history of the trolley car with that, and wouldn't it be great to put a sign there? So I had no knowledge of this, but that's tremendous news.
Grant, I don't think I made the connection before, but when Michael brought this up to me, I'm like, this is crazy.
Mhm.
Sign up, like, so we're gonna get that done, and Jim is gonna be the hero and figure out how to do it. So
That's right.
you're on, pal.
Okay.
Next item, I just wanted to mention this. This is another thing with this historical society and Michael, is that I was contacted by Rob Kuklovich, the CFO at St. Mark's, with whom, I've had this ongoing relationship, very productive over the Peter School Annex and the park and the archaeological dig and all that stuff. So I feel like I know him really well at this point. And he contacted me and he said, we've got these fantastic display tables that were in our library and they don't want them anymore. Do you want them? And I said, well, yeah, I want them, but I got nothing to do with them. We don't have a physical space. I can't, So I immediately thought of, Michael and the Fayetteville Hall project. And I called him up and I said, I sent him pictures. I said, yo, do you want these tables? They're like, he said, yeah, they're like several $1,000s a piece. And they're really gorgeous, wonderful display tables. And as I said to both Rob and Michael, what I would, in my dreams, what I see in at least one of those is a display of the artifacts that our friend Dan recovered from the St. Mark's Park Triangle. It's the perfect, vehicle to tell that story. So I'm hoping, if the synchronicity is right, that maybe Dan will eventually end up working to curate a display of those artifacts from St. Mark's Triangle into the cases donated by St. Mark's to the Historical Society. So it was actually an email exchange between them this afternoon that I was CC'd on. They're figuring out how to get them. They're going to reside in the Flag School for the time being, because they're still under construction at Fayetteville and don't want to risk damage, which makes perfect sense. But I may go over and help carry them across the street, because it's literally one side of Marlborough Road to the other, to get these done. So that's also very good news. Next to last thing I've got is, was also on that October 24th select board meeting, there was a directive, because I had said I had multiple conversations with Andrew Dennington, the select board chair, and Kathy Cook on the select board, and Marguerite Landry, about conditions at the town common. And I had showed you all the points that we have of concern in terms of signage, fencing, trees, etc. And the select board has been great about this. And at that meeting on the 24th, Andrew tasked Marguerite Landry, as the representative of the select board, to work with me representing the Historical Commission, and with Bill Cundiff at DPW, to enumerate, plan, and start addressing these issues. Funding sources to be determined, but we're talking about the common street signs. We're talking about the boundary stone that we've discussed. We're talking about maintenance on the howitzer. We're talking about the fencing. We're talking about tree trimming in the OBG. We're talking about restoration of headstones in the OBG. We're talking about issues in the rural cemetery as well. So a really broad spectrum. Marguerite had asked me for my kind of list of must-haves, and I presented them in fairly short order, is that this is what we want all the way down the line. So it's very good news. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, and this is not going to be an easy pull. And we've added some things recently, even down to, I was down there the other day photographing. There was a concern raised. I think it came from Bridget Galani DeCenzo, some of you know, who's used to work at the rural cemetery, is now at the transfer station. I think she had raised the concern about the flags. There's a Southborough town flag and a state flag and a U.S. flag that flies at that area toward the front. It was It's dedicated, I believe, to Leo Bertnazzi, if I'm not getting it messed up in my head, who designed the town flag. And anyway, those flags are in terrible condition, really faded out and tattered. So that's been added to the list. So it's a fairly long and growing list of concerns at those 3 locations: Town Common, OBG, Rural Cemetery. And I'm happy to say that we're going to have a voice, in getting those things done. So as individuals, if you have concerns, they may well have already been put on the list, but let me know. But I think this is really good. And actually, I understand it that Marguerite is going to, and because I'm actually going to go to the meeting as well on December 5th, next Tuesday. She's going to sort of enumerate for the rest of the select board what our list of concerns is, and just as a way of notifying them what the first step is of what the stuff that we're looking at. So I'll attend that and try to help wherever I can. Last thing is I was contacted by Judith Watson, who's our liaison to the master plan committee, for an update, which she tries to get twice a year. And so I met with her on the 18th by phone for about an hour, and just laid out all the stuff that we're trying to do. And I said, it's been in a way a little bit of a frustrating year because, for instance, I personally spent a lot of time on 5 Corderville Road, and that all just came a cropper for us. The backhoes over there to tear that building down any day now. But we do have a lot of, I think, hopeful things that are going on, good things going forward. And so she's brought up to speed. I didn't want to bring her on tonight because I knew we were going to go long as it was. But we're good with Judith for the next 6 months, and we'll talk to her again. The next time, I think I'd like to have her come to the meeting, rather than just deal with her personally, but it was more expedient in this case. Next thing we've got, I'm trying to do this pretty quick too. The historic house sign program. This is one of the things that's really good news. And I'm going to screen share again with you just for 2 seconds and show you something that makes me rather happy, even though my face is in it. Can you all see that? Let's see if that comes up. I got to get rid of this other one. Is it going in the right place there? Or is
Awesome.
Is it only partially? There you go. That's better. Is that better?
Yes.
That's good.
That is, of course, myself, from left to right, Annie, me, Karen and Praveen Mutalik, who live at 28 East Main Street. And that is the delivery, which we made on Saturday, November 11th, of the first house sign in the newly revived historic house signs program. You guys all saw it. We vetted the proofs. We talked about it. Some really good input. We got actually good input from I'm going blank all of a sudden.
Patty Fiore.
Yes, Patty Burns Fiore gave us a suggestion about getting historical commission on the same line at the bottom. We made that slight adjustment. Anyway, there it is. And it came out great. And it looks way better in person.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mutaliks were thrilled, absolutely thrilled to get it. So happy. And let me tell you something. They are the nicest people. And they're also like our dream recipients of a house sign, because their house is that mansard on East Main. It's a gorgeous house. They're deeply committed to keeping the house, the historic integrity of the house intact, to the point of having custom-made wooden storm windows made for their house. And those front doors you see in the background, Karen found in a like a salvage yard kind of situation, because the previous owner had put a steel door from Home Depot on the front of the house, which just wasn't period, if you know what I mean. And so they have worked as it turns out, for many years to bring this house back with a lot of love and care. So it was such a pleasure. And they had to wait a while because she had requested this quite a while ago. But they were a pleasure to deal with, super nice people. We couldn't have given the first one to a more deserving house or a more deserving couple of folks, you know, because of how committed they are to historic preservation. So I was really happy. You see how even I don't smile that big, but I was smiling there. So that's where we're at on that. And one thing that the Mudlicks said to Annie and I as we were delivering the sign, they said, well, like, how much, or how do I pay you, or something to that effect. And I reminded them, as I'd already told them, it's free. And they said, well, can we make a donation? And suddenly the sort of wheels started to spin for me. And I said, you know, I couldn't be more grateful actually for you asking that, because, you know, by the state statute that makes for the creation of historical commissions, we are allowed to accept donations, even real property, artifacts, and so on. And, you know, I said to Annie, gosh, wouldn't it really help to perpetuate the Historic House Sign Program if people who were so inclined, you know, really liked what they got, said, well, I'd like to donate either the whole amount, which currently is $73.37, or $50 or $20 or $10 or $5. It doesn't matter, you know, but it would help, obviously, and we'd be less of a burden budget-wise to the town. So and I talked to Annie as treasurer, of course, about how, you know, what do we need to do? And so she inquired of the finance people at the townhouse, and they said, yeah, we can do that. We can set this up. We do need this thing in terms of a signature on a document that authorizes people we designate to sign invoices and payrolls and so on, which we can sort of take care of. So I want to set this up so that we can accept donations. I think that's my opinion on it. Obviously, you guys have to approve, but I think it's a pretty good idea to be in that position. You know, that if somebody says, well, I love this program so much, I want to donate $500. Gosh, that, you know, that would help give away a lot of signs, or you know, if the donation was unrestricted, we might be able to do some other things through that means. So that's on the table. Now, the other thing I had on the agenda is that we have a half a dozen now applications for more signs. I believe maybe 5. Full disclosure, at the end of the list is mine, because we were trying to get one before I even got on the historical commission, and by then the sign program had been suspended. I will be a paying customer, by the way, in full. But my hope, what I want to do, again, with your concurrence, is part of the reason I wanted a photograph of the sign delivery was because I'd like to get Beth Malo at my Southborough to do a little piece on this, if she's willing, saying that we're back in business with this program. Here are the criteria, you know, for to get one of these signs, and if you think you're an applicant, please apply. You know, again, with a reminder that we were just able to get an extra $1,000 from that ARPA return to fund this, so we're a little bit flush, relatively speaking, you know, to be able to actively promote the program. And now that we have a good vendor and we're very pleased with the result, I'd like to go full steam ahead. One of the things that requires is a revision of the language. And I don't know, it's getting awfully late, so I don't know if we want to do this, but there's language on the website currently, right? That let me share this with you very quickly, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. This is falls under the Historical Commission's page, and it describes the current status of the Historic House Signs Program. Paragraph of sort of introduction. Then it explains what the signs are made out of now, which is completely different. Expected lifespan, cost, talks about placement. Then it's got two tabs for qualifying properties and how to apply. And there used to be, and I know this well because shortly after we first moved here and realized that my wife and I sort of qualified, our house qualifies, built in 1912, for a sign. She went down to the townhouse and inquired about this and said, where's the form that it says on this website is there? And nobody knew where it was, like, because the program had sort of gone moribund. And how do you apply? But nobody could figure it out. But so it used to be a paper application, which I think is pointless at this point. And then this what properties qualifies takes you to a fairly, that's the verbiage, having to do with age, historic event, person, period, style, cultural landscape, archaeology. And they say that to qualify, you need to meet two of those requirements. Well, some of this rhetoric is pretty good and some of it I don't like. So the first one, for instance, says the home or other structure was built prior to World War II. In our efforts to get the demolition delay bylaw consistent with the language of the zoning code, we also need to make this consistent with the language of the zoning code. So what I did, I rewrote, I have a draft now of all the text that I would like to see appear in place of what's currently there now. And I'm trying to, okay, I'm going to bring this up. One of the things that I did on this was to say that it should meet simply the definition rather than the business about age. I've got to close one little thing so I can see what I'm doing here. It says to participate in the program, property owners are asked to ensure that the structure meets two or more of the criteria outlined below. And I kept essentially undisturbed items 2 through 5. But in the first one, rather than saying that the house needs to be built before before World War II, what I say here is that it should meet the definition of historic building as provided in the town zoning code, which to me makes a lot more sense. And that definition is a building or structure listed on the Historic Property Survey of Southborough, Mass, June 2000. That's the macro stuff. On file with the clerk's office, and as may be subsequently amended and approved by the Southborough Historical Commission or any other building or structure that is more than 85 years old. Period. That's the date, age part of it. And then if you met one of the other things, and most of them will fall under period style, simply that there's some architectural significance, and with the notation that it's not just noted architects or builder, but the vernacular architecture, falls under the category of qualifying. So if it's more than 85 years old, basically, and if it's most anything, it's going to qualify. In any case, it's probably not a good idea, especially since we're shorthanded. I had hoped to resolve this tonight because I wanted to work with the IT folks to get this up and published. I did some rewriting of the the opening, for instance, just I'll go back to that real quick for 1 second. The prologue is a little bit different. I thought a little bit cleaner. I describe now the signs as they are, that, you know, they're now, you know, PVC material, what the size is, that they're digitally printed and gloss laminated, that we have black stainless steel screws, thanks to Jim Blaschke. You give with the signs, we give them to the Mudlicks. What the cost is going to be, and that I've written in this language about that we'll gratefully accept donations for, you know, but that in fact the signs are free. Recommendation on placement, and then qualifying elements. And then I just simply say, you know, to email the Historic Commission with questions or to request the sign, and to apply, give us your name, your full address, the date of construction as listed in Southborough or Macris records, and any other pertinent historical or architectural information. And we can look it up also, and that we will review the application at an upcoming meeting, contact you with our findings, and then make sure that we discuss with you briefly what the exact wording is going to be. So it's pretty simple what I did with this. And, you know, again, I would really, in a way, like to move forward directly with this, but I think, unless you guys have a different opinion, that I should probably wait until Annie
Yeah.
and Dan are here.
I'd suggest that, yeah, she's been driving the signs. Let's get her keep
Right.
involved.
I think
Yeah,
and also another potential benefit of waiting is if we get the donation thing set up, then I don't know if it would be an online or if you have to write a check or something, but either way, once you get the information for that, when you have the Buy Southborough post and you have this, you could include, you know, or you can donate the amount here, and have that be a little plug for us as well.
Yeah, the other thing that argues for waiting is that Annie had thought that she was going to have the proofs ready actually for the next handful of signs, but the vendor didn't get it done and didn't respond. So we can't, you know what I mean? I was hoping that we'd approve the rhetoric, we'd approve the financial aspect of this, and we'd approve the proofs and go forward. But so I think we should just hold this, if that's okay with you. But that it's really great news. I mean, you know, I'm like revved up like crazy that we, after all this work, and, you know, Annie again did most of the legwork, that we got the signs made. It looks fantastic. The first recipients were over the moon to get it. And then they made this very helpful suggestion about accepting donations, you know, which I latched onto for dear life. And I thought, yeah, good idea. Thanks. So, all right, we'll table that. We'll move forward with it.
One question, Kevin. Is it possible to email the proof that you just showed us?
We can. And like when Annie gets the new ones, we'll circulate before, you know, so people can look, not comment, of course.
Okay. Yes. And also your improvement for the website.
Yeah, and so people have a chance to look that
Yeah.
over. I just
Yes.
finished writing that this afternoon, you know,
Okay.
I'm not sending them out another thing, you know.
Okay. No, that's good. If you could send it out, we could take a look at it.
Yeah,
That would be great.
that would help, because like I said, when Mr. Deli Priscoli was here, I make typos too often. Okay, so moving on, we're almost done. We need to Grant indicated that he wasn't quite ready with the October 23rd meeting minutes, so we will be sure to post draft minutes so we don't get in hot water with our friends at the clerk's office. But he also reminded me that I didn't have on the agenda, which is why one of the reasons I sent an amended agenda, was that we had to approve the meeting minutes for what date is it? October 18th.
Yeah.
That was the roundtable discussion with open space, shops, rec and historical with regard to 21 Highland. That was just a 2-page thing. Grant sent it out. I know Kelly, you were
Yes.
involved in that.
Yeah, and sorry for the late hour.
You're off the hook, Kelly, on that one. But are the Grant, Jim, I've read them. They're great. I have one emendation, Grant.
Sure.
Right at the top on line 9, you say virtual meeting, remote participation. Wouldn't you call it a hybrid meeting? Because it was, or what,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because public attendance was allowed. And like Andrew Pfaff was there and somebody else in person.
Let's see. So it's at the Public Safety Building and by virtual meeting.
Oh, you have it on both?
Well, that's how it's written, but I just, to be honest, I copied the format from the previous.
Okay.
From the
It
previous,
looked
so
like-
I'm not sure. Yeah.
It didn't look like it was, I only saw virtual meeting, remote participation. I didn't see I'm
Oh,
just, hang on one second. I'm just pulling this up just to be sure so we don't goof this up and have to go back. Yeah, well, it says it gives the place and the address, and then it says virtual meeting remote. So I think that maybe should be hybrid or something.
I will make that change now.
Or you can may say hybrid meeting remote participation. Or maybe just check with the clerk's office how they want that phrased. That was the only
Okay.
thing. Otherwise it was perfect. Jim, do you have any corrections?
None. They look good.
Nope.
Look good.
Michelle, anything?
Nothing.
Could somebody move to approve the October 18th minutes?
Don't move.
Great. Second?
Second.
Second.
Oh.
Michelle, Michelle, I
You're
think,
funny.
Michelle, I think you beat Grant by a nose. Roll call vote, Jim,
Aye.
Grant,
Overwhelmingly, aye.
yeah, Michelle,
Yes.
Kelly,
I'm abstaining.
okay, correct. Got it first time out and you right in the swing. Miller is aye, so 401 approving Mr. Farrington's stellar under pressure October 18th minutes. And then the 23rd we'll approve next time. He's going to post Promise Me, Grant, in the next week or so. We'll get draft minutes up there. Okay, so all we have to do now is schedule another meeting. Here's what I think. We do have a couple other things hanging. I would, as tired as we all are right now, I do think among ourselves, again, and obviously an open meeting, but that we should talk amongst ourselves about where we're at regarding 84 Main. I really appreciated, the dialogue tonight. And I think there's a little bit further to go just to get everybody in a happy place and buttoned up and comfortable with it. I don't necessarily think we need to do it in December. The historic house sign thing, I'd kind of like to get resolved, but I don't know if that's, that is world changing either in the month of December. Meanwhile, it being one day, I think, until December, unless we're going to have a meeting in the next 2 weeks or so, then we're getting into the holidays, which nobody wants to meet. Yeah. I don't think any of you do you? So I don't know how you feel about it, but it seems to me maybe the safest way to go is like first week of January kind of stuff, once we're clear of all that. How does that sit?
That works for me.
We have no other business we'd have to worry about before that?
Well, again, I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff we talked tonight. The historic house signs program. The quicker we get all that approved, the quicker we can get people their signs. But yeah.
Do you think it might be wise just to schedule an abbreviated meeting?
Yeah,
With,
that, if you guys,
with a short agenda?
yes, if you guys are amenable to that, I could promise that we could do one in about half an hour, on the sign stuff and not do any of the other junk,
Yeah.
And approval of minutes, perhaps.
and approval of minutes. So that would be like, I don't want to get any closer than with the 13th. That would be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Is
That's,
With that like a short, I'm talking really short and
Yes.
like come beat me with a stick if it's more than 45 minutes. You all just, hey, listen, if you all just signed off on me after 45 minutes, the meeting would end, right? Because I have no quorum. I got nothing to, So, I mean, we could do that if that's all right. Any objection to that, the 13th?
It's open here.
No
I'm
objection
open.
here.
Yeah, that works for me as well.
How about you, Michelle?
it does,
I think
just-
that's cool.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, and I really thank you for suggesting it. So we'll do a really quick, short, no BS meeting on the 13th and get a couple of these little things approved and done.
Yes.
And then we'll go off and have a happy holidays and meet in mid-January, unless somebody decides they want to tear down their house. Christmas. And because
They're
then
going to be hearing from us.
we got to meet within 10 days or, Kelly, remind me but it's, you got to meet right away. All right. So the 13th is going to be, any other business? It's stuff about 21 Highland, but we're going to leave that. We'll talk about that on the 13th.
The only thing I'll note, just very quick, is that we talked a lot about CPC tonight. So the next CPC meeting is December 6th, so next Wednesday. And we are in the stretch where we're probably going to be making determinations soon about which projects we go forward with. That would either be the December or the January meeting. Or we might have a couple more because we have to really get it hammered down the next month or two. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Thing I'd add, the Tricentennial Committee meeting did meet on the 2nd of November. Basically an organization session to get acquainted and get a master plan started. And we all took assignments to look into what other towns have done. And Jenny set up a kind of a common share file for us to put information into, election of chair and vice chair, et cetera. But basically an organization kickoff. Next session is December 6th.
Good. Well, maybe, you have something that I did hear about this. Was pleased that you're off and rolling. So good. Any public comment? Thank goodness there is not.
Is anybody left?
Is anybody left?
Only my wife is here, and I think she's probably hopefully asleep. Good. All right. So we're done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Okay.
Michelle,
moved by-
second.
Seconded by Michelle. Roll call vote. Jim.
Aye.
Grant.
Aye.
Michelle.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Miller is aye. 5-0 to get out of here. I thank you for your good humor and patience, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Good night.
A short
Good night,
meeting.
everyone.
Yeah.
Jordy.
Good night. Bye.